It's time for Twig This Week in Google. Paris Martineau's here. Jeff Jarvis is here. I'm here. And Kathy Gellis, our favorite attorney, joins us to explain the good, the bad, and the ugly, the Supreme Court's final decisions earlier this week. We'll also talk about the White House Conference for Creators. Why weren't we invited? And what happens next with the Internet Archive? All of that's coming up as we have a lovely celebratory This Week in Google as we approach the 4th of July. Next.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Twig. This Week in Google, episode 775, recorded Wednesday, July 3rd, 2024. Chocolate cream-filled donuts for the soul. It's time for Twig this week in, what was it? Twig's Grandpa Security with AI. That's the new name.
This week in Grandpa Security now with AI.
That comes
straight to you from a member of our Discord.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the wonderful Paris Martineau from The Information. Hello, Paris. Bonsoir, madame.
Bonsoir, Leo.
It's nice to have you here. We have international viewers now all over the world who are enjoying Paris Martineau.
Ouais, ouais.
Ouais, ouais. Maintenant, Paris Martineau. Also with us, ladies and gentlemen, please get ready and say hello to the Leonard Tow Professor for Journalistic Innovation at the Creme. Graduate School of Journalism at the City University of New York. Emeritus. Soon to be a scholar of typesetting, I think. Next week, you're going to do what?
I'm going to the Rare Book School, which has wonderful, amazing courses, and I'm going to University of Virginia. They have them in various places, but this course is in the University of Virginia about typography and the impact of industrialization on it. Since I'm writing a book about the linotype, hello, that's me.
Nice.
So I'm reading all kinds of, let's see, I have homework. I have Thinking with Type.
That's a great book. Yeah.
The book, Nicole Howard's book.
Do you have Stop Stealing Sheep, which is one of the great
of
typographic
style?
Wow.
I have some Updike books to have to read. Yeah, I'm doing my homework.
John Updike? Was he a famous?
No.
Okay. I have a book to read, too, apparently. I got in the mail this special delivery from Simon & Schuster, and I'm wondering if it could be anybody I know's book. Let's see. No, it's not. Okay, never mind.
Well,
I thought it might be yours.
Well, I got a copy of The Web We Weave, which is back behind.
Unfortunately, you didn't get it yet with Leo's really wonderful blurb. Thank you, my friend. It was poetic. It's downright poetic.
It's I got to tell you, to get me to write anything is pulling teeth. I've written many a book, and I hate it. And I told your editor, I said, I'm better at talking than writing. But for you, I had, and thank you for saying such kind words coming from you.
It's really wonderful.
That's high praise. But does it go on the cover? I know there's a digital.
Yes, it does. You're the lead blurb on the cover.
What? But what about Paris? She should be the lead blurb.
I haven't blurbed.
You didn't blurb?
I've just consumed.
Oh.
No.
Okay, well, I blurbed.
You and Craig Newmark and John Palfrey, the head of the MacArthur Foundation.
That's pretty darn good.
Taylor Lorenz.
Oh, I'm in good company
others.
here.
Yeah.
They're going to say, who's that Leo guy? What's he doing there?
Right up top.
Your book, The Web We Weave, comes out...
October.
Also sitting here in her purple cap, It's nice to see you, Kathy Gellis. She was on Twit on Sunday, but she asked me, she said, the last day of the Supreme Court's current session is Monday, and they're probably going to announce some stuff then.
Well, yeah.
They might be announcing some things.
They might be announcing some stuff.
So she said, should I come back and give us, because you gave us a great analysis on Murti, the social media thing, which really was, we kind of at the time on Sunday thought it was kind of a victory, but it sounds like really they're sending it back down to the lower courts. More than anything else. Or the states, right?
Murti is a victory.
It is, okay.
It's, it gets remanded, but that isn't necessarily bad. I wouldn't put it past the Fifth Circuit to screw things up again, but their wings have been clipped.
This was the Texas and Florida, respectively. Oh no, this is the Missouri one.
Yeah. So there were 2 internet-related decisions that we were waiting for, and waiting, along with basically every Supreme Court decision that they had heard for a case they'd heard this year. And we got Murty on last Wednesday, but that's all we got. And we got no decisions on Thursday, and we got no decisions on Friday. And so then they added one last day, which was this past Monday. And it seemed likely that we would get the last missing decision that we were waiting for, and the other ones that the nation was waiting for. And did we, and how?
There were quite a few. So just to catch us up, if you didn't listen on Sunday, Murty versus Missouri, the Missouri Attorney General, they were suing over what?
People who got kicked off the internet. Well, that's maybe too broad. People whose speech got moderated off of social media platforms sued. And they didn't sue the platforms because not arguably, Section 230 says they can't sue the platforms. Section 230 immunizes the platforms for their moderation decisions. But what had been happening is the platforms were moderating consistent with their moderation policies, and they were in various discussions with various members of the federal government, particularly in the Biden administration, and having discussions of like, hi, we'd like to make a vaccine policy. What is good information that we should allow and what's information we shouldn't allow? What is your take on things? And they were consulting the experts within the CDC, for example, to make those determinations. Also talking to CISA about disinformation threats and a variety of agencies. And because those conversations were happening, and there was eventually the Twitter files was revealing that some of the conversations, people in the executive branch had opinions about what was good, bad, or otherwise. Since the moderation happened in the shadow of those conversations, although some of the decisions predated those, some of the moderation decisions predated the conversations, the people who got moderated away decided, this is censorship, because the government couldn't censor us directly. We had First Amendment rights. So what they did was they jawboned. And that's the idea that you pressure an intermediary to do the bidding that you can't do yourself. So, if I got deleted off of Facebook, and Facebook had a conversation with the executive branch, quid pro quo, QED, throw some Latin at it. This must be the fault of the federal government for having caused this to happen. And a whole bunch of people who had gotten moderated away sued. And then the states of Louisiana and Missouri, they sued, both claiming their own rights and that they were somehow speaking on behalf of their citizens who were affected by these moderation decisions, which was really frightening view of standing, which I think threatened to upend the entire First Amendment. And they just threw this at the wall. It was a lot of plaintiffs, a lot of defendants. It was a mess. And the court basically looked at it and said, no way, you don't get to plead something that's this messy. You have to be able to draw a much stronger line between the injury you're complaining of, that it was caused, potentially caused by the defendants you're alleging have done something wrong, and especially since they were asking for an injunction, that if we give you the injunction, that this is somehow going to provide a remedy for what you're complaining about and actually help your problem. And it was just such a mess. And the Justice Barrett wrote the decision and said, I've looked at your record, it's garbage, and go away.
Good. So that's one they got right.
It's one they got right.
Now, we were waiting for the 2 NetChoice ones. Those are the Texas and Florida.
Those are the Texas and
Florida.
And
that did come out. Those did come out Monday.
Those came out Monday.
The day after we did Twit. So I wanted you to come back and talk about that.
Yes. So the Supreme Court has wrecked our democracy, but done a very nice job upholding the First Amendment. So
for now, right, Kathy?
For now. Well, it's the one piece that's still standing, and it's the one piece that's still standing with coherence and respect for previous precedent and logical outcomes, and really teasing out what would happen if we had alternative results.
Before you explain, let me just ask, just so I have context and know how nervous to be. Because it's remanded, you're going to explain all that. Could the lower courts still screw this up, or was the defense such that I should relax a little bit?
Well, one of the cases is going back to Texas, so you can never sleep easy when it's going back to the Texas courts.
Okay, that's what.
But
I'm still nervous.
But I don't think this court has. I think a majority of this court. I think there's at least 6 votes that would still think that if Texas screws it up, they're probably not going to give cover for it. So
okay, I apologize to have interrupted for that context, but go ahead with your explanation.
Yeah, I mean, there's one of the things that's a little open is that both the Texas law and the Florida law had ended up enjoined, but Florida's law had ended up enjoined in a much more logical manner because the 11th Circuit handled it much more reasonably, and the Texas one ended up with an emergency stay from the Supreme Court, I think. And one of the things people are kind of wondering, although we're going on the theory that yes, the stay is still in effect, because in the wake of this decision, it does not look like the Supreme Court wants that law to go in effect. I think it believes it's garbage, but that's one of the things that's a little bit open. But the crux of this decision is that there's a couple of things that come up in it, but one of the big ones is something I mentioned on Twit, which was the idea that platforms have their own First Amendment rights in how they choose to moderate their platforms was something that had not been explicitly articulated by the Supreme Court before. They had articulated in the context of newspapers with the case Miami Herald versus Tornillo, and then the open question was whether that reasoning would apply to internet platforms. And there is a ton of language in this decision that says, yes, in fact, it does. That what
There
the
is a
platforms
Moderation is speech.
Moderation is speech, and it's
Mike
protectable.
Masnick and Tector, where you also write, says the question at heart of both cases was whether or not the government could compel private websites to host speech those websites didn't wish to host.
Right. So there's
and the court said, no, you don't have to.
Right. But actually, now I realize, as my brain is unfurling this, that Jeff's concerns are a little bit more well taken, because the other part of this decision was a majority of the court had some concerns with the type of challenge that was brought. That NetChoice basically sued and basically said everything about this law is bad. And it was defended by the states as saying all or nothing, our law is great. It was never applied in terms of specific applications of how that law would affect different, very specific functions, that specific platform, specific functions. It was sort of one big, nothing here is legitimate. And the court at oral argument was sort of like, but what about this? What about email? What about this, that, and the other thing? I think that came out of the blue. I think it really caught everybody by surprise. They granted the cert petition on the broader questions of whether the First Amendment protected the content moderation decisions. So the case has been remanded in both instances, the Florida and the Texas, for go back and sort out what does it mean that you didn't bring a facial challenge? Does the challenge need to be brought that way? So it's not quite clear exactly what will happen next. But on the other hand, every state that wants to impose regulation on a platform is now in a hole, because they're going to try to assert that, yes, we can totally shape platforms and affect how they moderate their systems. But they're going to be doing it in the face of all this law, all this language written by Kagan saying, yeah, well, there's the First Amendment that's going to, you're going to have to, it stops you most likely from being able to do that. Then there's a question in that there's the dissent by Alito, Thomas, and Gorsuch, who are basically they're basically saying, we agree that, we agree with the result that this case is going back down to sort out the facial challenge issue. And we point out that all that other lovely language is just dicta. And so we are not signing on, our vote should not be construed as signing on to all that lovely First Amendment protective language. We're only buying this decision for the purpose of, we're saying go back and litigate it some more. But there are still what looks like 6 votes, or at least 5 votes, that says, we actually kind of endorse that language. And I think it's going to be hard for states to defend their attempts to force social media to regulate in any particular, to moderate in any particular way, in light of all this point saying that, well, the First Amendment applies and it's rooted and it's reasoned and stuff like that.
So the takeaway really is we hadn't heard this from the court before, but the court did in fact say, yes, the internet is covered by the First Amendment, just like a newspaper is covered by the First Amendment. You can't force them to publish any particular
We think so.
content.
The question that it's not a dissent, it's actually a concurrence, but the Alito, Gorsuch, Thomas thing is whether it is precedent that every court must abide by,
Oh, interesting.
or whether it is just persuasive dicta that, who are they kidding? You're gonna disagree with any of that analysis?
Because they were told to rethink, to go back. They were told to go back with this with an analysis of the First Amendment. Are the dicta in here sufficient to say this is how you're going to analyze it?
Well, dicta doesn't count as precedent. So if it's dicta, it isn't precedent. But there's the very open question for what you just said. Is it dicta at all, or is it actually part of the precedent? Like, is that actually the holding and the rest is just sort of the procedural instructions for here's another issue? I think it's really nebulous. Obviously, the Supreme
Court say this is precedent and this is dicta, or are you supposed to infer it? How do you know?
It's like being married, Leo.
Yeah, I mean,
it's fine.
Even under the heady days when there was a lot more consistency, I'm not entirely sure there were bright line rules, but there were sort of patterns. And now we're in Calvin Ball days anyway.
So it isn't clearly understood that, okay. And by the way, precedent, I take it, carries more weight than dicta.
Precedent is all the other courts.
It used to.
Well, okay.
That's the old stare decisis thing.
And all the other courts would be bound to adhere to that decision. They have to.
It's not merely stare decisis. It is, you don't have a choice. There's a precedent.
It's precedent, and it is the articulation of what the law of the land is. And so the courts have to be.
That's why the Supreme Court has a lot of power.
Right.
Because in effect, they make law by their decisions.
Right. And that goes back to Marbury versus Madison, which is the court construed for itself this power to do that level of interpretation. We've been kind of tooling along for nearly 250 years and kind of getting away with it. But I mean, one thing that Kagan's decision had was analysis that was rooted into prior decisions. It was analytically rooted in history and precedent and other cases. However, some of the other decisions that the court
We've
released,
learned that that's not necessary
that
in every
they have
case.
also issued on Monday, maybe a lot less tethered.
But there are no rules. They can do that, right? I mean, who's to make the rule? What we've learned now is the Supreme Court essentially has no bumpers. There's nothing to rein them in if they choose.
Well, so one of the things is, actually going back to it, do the other courts in the land have to adhere to what the Supreme Court said? I said the answer is yes. For an awfully long time, for nearly 250 years, the answer has been yes. It is not quite clear what the answer is.
Interesting.
Because I don't think that's actually a rule written down.
It's not law.
Some of this is norms.
Yeah.
Some of this is norms. This is how we do things.
And as we've seen.
And that's the thing that's out the window.
Yeah.
So, the more Roberts wants to make things up, he kind of undoes it. He's got the power to say whatever he wants to say, but at a certain point, in theory, he could be ignored. The problem is if he gets ignored, what do we have instead? Then we kind of have a separate form of lawlessness. It is not great if all the different courts can all do different things and not kind of be unified into one coherent law. So there is something useful in the Supreme Court actually having that sort of power to issue the law for the land, but you kind of want it to be really careful when it does it so that it's actually usable, sustainable, and something that the majority of the country would be able to use and respect.
It strikes me that for 250 years, this country is run on norms. And we presumed that people would live up to the norms because it wasn't encoded. It just was.
We also thought
accepted.
we had laws, but we were more under common law than we thought.
We didn't realize how much of it was merely norm.
Well,
and how little of it was actually code.
Or some of it is norm, some of it may actually be prior precedent, or some of the prior precedent was set up as this is the way we're going to do it. So now if
it's only the norms that enforce precedents, right?
Well, if they dump out the precedent, then they're kind of dumping also the things that give the court the legitimacy.
Yeah, right.
So I don't see what the long game here is. The long game is not good. This is upending things that keep the system sustainable. And
I'm just surprised that they were so easily upended, to be honest. That's all I'm saying.
The last
7 years have taught us anything. It's that so how much of what we expect is based on pure expectation and not law.
I mean, there were a couple of justices that I think had, specific agendas, but I wasn't that was a couple of votes. I did not expect that.
6 is a lot of votes.
6 is a lot of Justice Barrett did not join one aspect of the decision, which was, I think, using the evidence. The evidence.
Now you're talking about a different.
I'm talking
case.
about a different case, but
which while it has a lot of impact on us as American citizens, probably isn't germane in a technology context.
No, Chevron is more germane.
Chevron is.
Yeah.
But Leo, I just put in the
look.
Discord.
Hey, my hair's on fire. It's been on fire ever since Monday.
Well, the problem is
I also understand that we have a variety of political points of view.
Okay.
Watching the show, and they also expect that we cover technology and not politics. In fact, I even hear from people all the time who say, "Look, I get enough politics. It's not that I don't want to talk about politics. I just don't. I come here to get away."
There's plenty to talk about that is relevant to tech.
The question
so we should make it relevant.
But the problem is I've asked the question, what does this mean? All of a sudden, I'm a lot less sure what it means. And
well, this is one of the reasons I really like having you on, Kathy, because unlike so many pundits in the legal profession, but because they're pundits, they tend to be, very certain about what it all means. Mm-hmm. And you are very balanced in that, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, my comments about the other case aren't really in terms of the result.
That's all we could say about it. Right. The other case. That's what we're going to call it.
It's not about the result, but the problem is the process. And one of the reasons I'm emphasizing that the decision I am here to talk about is a good one is it is rooted in precedent. It's cited. It's sourced. And when we look at decisions that we're more uncomfortable with, one of the things is, well, how did they get to that result? If they got to that result in a reasoned and rooted way, it's a lot easier to accept and say, okay, this was bad, but okay, we'll keep going. The problem when it's just sort of like thrown out there, the problem is not the result. The problem is the method by which the result is gone to. And yeah, it's a little bit like, okay, let's keep talking about the tech, but a lot that we were counting on in our world has just gone upside down, and we might need to roll that into how we think about things.
So
if you want to feel a little better, I put the last paragraph of the NetChoice decision into the Discord.
This is
there's language in there.
Who wrote the decision? Whose writing is this? Because it's quite good.
It was Kagan, right?
Kagan wrote the majority.
She says Texas has never been shy and has always been consistent about its interest. The objective is to correct the mix of viewpoints that major platforms present. But a state may not interfere with private actors' speech to advance its own vision of ideological balance. States and their citizens are, of course, right to want an expressive realm in which the public has access to a wide range of views. I think we can all agree to that. But the way the First Amendment achieves that goal is to prevent the government from tilting the debate in a preferred direction, not by licensing the government to stop private actors from speaking as they wish and preferring some views over another. A state cannot prohibit speech to rebalance the speech market. That unadorned interest is not unrelated to the suppression of free expression. And Texas may not pursue it consistent with the First Amendment. I think that's nice. It's beautifully
written. Those are cheering words.
Yeah. I mean,
if it sticks.
For those of us litigating it, and, one of the reasons it's set up with the plaintiffs, NetChoice and CCIA, was to cover a range of political viewpoints, because NetChoice is typically a conservative organization, was to sort of say this isn't about who you want, which horse you want to win in the race. This is about whether the race is constitutionally set up. And it was really weird to kind of have these laws that just like you'd look at them as a First Amendment advocate and say, there's no way. This cannot possibly be something that the First Amendment would tolerate. And just to go through bizarro land where the laws were getting passed and in Texas they were getting upheld. And, it is nice that basically Kagan wrote a decision that said, you're not crazy. This is just as stupid and unconstitutional as you thought it was.
Did you file on this in NetChoice?
I did.
Kathy?
In this case, my clients
What was your primary argument?
So my clients in this case were the Copia Institute, which is Mike Masnick and Tech Dirt. And so he has, he's wonky and comments about these things, but he also has comments and in theory, he's not touched by these laws, but he could be touched by these laws. And if he's not touched by these laws, new laws could be written that would reach him.
As we are, by the way. I think any internet publisher is.
Like the fact that they're like, we're just going after the big guys is no assurance whatsoever.
In fact, the big guys can defend themselves. It's the little guys you got to protect.
And then also, like, what do you do about Wikimedia, which is a very big little guy or a very little big guy? So that was one client. I also had Chris Riley, who is a Mastodon admin, because he's sitting there in the crosshairs as a platform operator. And we also had Blue Sky, which is a brand new platform that did not even really exist at the time that this law was passed. Like, the litigation has been going on for years. This was not actually, I wrote a brief in this case at the Supreme Court, but it's not even the first one. I had another.
This case was aimed at Twitter, right? Primarily Twitter and Facebook?
Well, I'm certain Facebook and, probably Twitter, because they are the most directly social media-ish.
Right.
And then there's a footnote either in this or Murchie where they're like, Twitter now has a new name and Facebook now has a new name. We're just going to call them Twitter and Facebook because we're just not going to keep up with them renaming themselves.
It's complicated.
That's funny.
But this had been going on for a long time. Like the Florida law was the one when DeSantis liked Disney. There was the theme park exception, which is that these platform rules only apply to platforms that did not have a theme park. When he liked Disney. And then when he got mad at Disney, they amended the law to take out the theme park exemption. But talk about
gives you a perfect example of why states should not be in this business.
In the speech regulation, because they don't like the speech anymore, so therefore they want to punish the speech. I mean, the First Amendment horror was so obvious. And then the Texas law, it's structured differently. It does different things, but I can't remember exactly. I think at the district court it may have actually been enjoined, but then it ended up in the Fifth Circuit.
So
the Fifth Circuit made up the First Amendment.
We'll move on from the Supreme Court.
We can try.
I just can't go there. That's all. There was, at the same time, all this attention is being paid to these decisions that came out on Monday. A decision from a judge in a Mississippi case that also is fairly important. The judge blocked the Mississippi law that required age verification on social media.
Now, it's interesting. That's not the first time a court has enjoined these age verification laws. I don't remember what number we're up to, but there's been a couple.
This was a Mississippi law that would have required age verification for everyone and parental consent for teens in order to make accounts on social media sites. So I have to prove that I'm 67 in order to make an account on a social media site.
And that you are yourself, so this becomes, there goes your ability
privacy.
To have anonymous speech. You're going to have a nice data set of very sensitive personal information that needs to be protected.
This was Mississippi House Bill 1126. NetChoice, which is an industry group that represents Meta and Google, also opposed this. They were the lead party.
They've been quite active in suing. They've sued in California, so the age-appropriate design law has been enjoined, and that's now up at the Ninth Circuit.
There's no way to do age proof without impinging
the Supreme
your
Court's
privacy.
Did you see line 71 on Texas? Supreme Court is going to take this up.
Yeah. Texas's law was a little different. So, but the porn verification, I don't think. There's some factors that differentiate, but still it's the whole idea of, I think a lot of the age verification is essentially, this is regulation that is speaking to platforms. Now, what's interesting is these laws are getting enjoined, and we're getting enjoined even before this NetChoice decision at the Supreme Court, because you can kind of look at it and rethink how would the First Amendment apply and realize that there's big problems with it.
Does this mean basically all 19 states have age verification bills? Are they all dead in the water?
They have a very significant uphill battle, and so does COSA, which is being pushed by. I mean, some of these bills are coming out.
Also relies on age
some
verification.
of these bills are being pushed by Democrats.
Yeah.
It also tends to put into question any of the bills, because sometimes they're not doing age verification. Sometimes they're doing no algorithms. Sometimes it's no algorithms for kids. Sometimes it's no algorithms for anyone. And this NetChoice language written by Kagan puts those into question.
Very good.
So
love hearing that.
One other thing worth mentioning, but we have to sneak back a little bit into the Supreme Court, is one of the issues is Section 230 and the cases involving accusations that the platforms were negligently designed, and that if they were negligently designed, Section 230 does not apply. It has not been going well for the platforms so far, and I think it's a big problem for Section 230, the First Amendment, and the internet. But there was a cert petition on one of the cases, and where 230 was found to have applied, and cert was denied. The Supreme Court won't hear that case, but Justice Thomas has a 3-page screed where he criticizes it, and but it has no power, but he's still out there being very annoying.
Just to make people happy, NetChoice is funded by Google. So this is a show about Google. Just wanted you to know.
I mean, Google is a benefactor of these decisions, too.
Yeah. Google's impacted by all of this.
Very much so.
We are
obviously
all impacted, but yes, Google. I mean, I think Google is not just a part of the trade associations, but in some of these cases, I think maybe even more directly implicated. But Google was Google versus Gonzalez too. That was the last Section 230 case.
Right. Yeah. So that was a YouTube case.
That was a YouTube case. I mean, sitting here as an advocate doing this advocacy in this space. I mean, 2 years before the decision, before oral argument in Google versus Garcia, me and my compatriots were sitting there like, okay, we've had wins in the district courts and appellate courts, but oh my gosh, we think we're going to run into a buzzsaw when we get up to the Supreme Court. And we were really, really, really worried. And actually, I think now we're sort of sitting here like, okay, we've got some tools in our tool belt and we can go out and keep fighting this stuff.
That's good.
Yeah.
You're watching This Week in Google. Yes, we are talking about Google, believe it or not, with Kathy Gellis, who has joined us. She is a attorney practicing particularly in this area. Mm-hmm. She is at cgcounsel.com and, of course, writes for Tech Dirt and files briefs on behalf of Tech Dirt's Copia Institute.
God's work.
That's Jeff Jarvis, who has God's beard, actually.
Not God.
But he's not God. Just in case you were worried about that. And
old as. But
Paris Martineau, who is as young as a spring daisy. She's a reporter for that information. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. All right. We could, it's so tempting to go on and on about this.
Can I hear a little bit about Chevron? And
because this so-called Chevron deference comes from a case where Chevron sued, was it the EPA, saying you can't tell us what to do, and the court in that case 40 years ago said, well, wait a minute, these administrative regulatory agencies can tell you what to do, even if they haven't been told so by Congress. They are presumed to have some expertise. That was all overturned.
The question is, what do you do when there's gaps in ambiguity?
They deferred to the agencies in the past.
Much more deference than now there's less.
So who's going to make the determination now? I've seen it said that the court says, well, it's okay, we'll handle it.
I think the question, there's kind of two things that happen, because actually to add to the Chevron case is another Monday case where they talked about the statute of limitations, where if you don't like an agency decision, how long do you have to challenge it? And they changed the way the statute of limitations is thought of. So instead of being 6 years after the rule is final, it's now 6 years after you were affected by the final rule.
Oh, interesting.
So in theory, that becomes infinite. So that is a separate thing that is basically targeting agencies and their ability to effectively issue regulations. Chevron talked about sort of in the gaps where Congress hasn't written a statute that fully covers everything, which sometimes happens because Congress doesn't draft things right, and sometimes happens because the future has continued on and you haven't updated the statute, or the statute was written to be scalable. What can the agencies do? So the agencies, in theory, can still go on their merry way, issuing rules and doing things the way they wanted, but the procedure around challenging them it's made it a lot more open season on what an agency does, which means it's going to be harder for them to do something that we can count on as being final rules that can guide our behaviors, and we'll know where our protections are, we'll know what our prohibitions are.
If I don't like regulation 123, and say, Chevron throws this open, you made it very vague, you screwed up, agency. Do I complain to the agency and tell them they better get their act together, or do I have to go to court to fight the agency? What's the path for striking down regulations of which I'm sure we're going to see lots.
I think it's basically that if the agency does something that you think they're not supposed to have done, you challenge it in the courts. Now, granted, we've also been dealing with a universe where everybody has just been bringing whatever they're unhappy to a district court in Texas. Anyway. So we've kind of already been having open season on the regulatory apparatus anyway, but this makes it a lot more open season.
And the reason this applies to tech, and the Verge wrote about this, is that some of these agencies include the FCC, which of course has gone two different ways on net neutrality in the last few years. Maybe somebody else should be deciding in that case. It also applies to the FTC and the FDA and so forth. But the interesting point that you've made, and you made it on Twitter on Sunday, is it's just not clear what the impact of this is. It doesn't immediately throw out the regulatory bodies.
I mean, I think I'm not going to actually. I did on Sunday, and I shouldn't. There's a lot of panic, and I don't think it's completely misplaced. Plus, some very smart people may be saying things that I'm not saying.
Okay.
But my general reaction to things are, look, if you can play this hand that you've just been dealt with, good lawyering, or a plausibly written and statutory update, okay, then I'm not going to really worry about what the decision said as much, because there's other things to worry about. But this one is really probably going to put some strain back into the system, mostly because we don't know. Like, there's going to be some rigmarole before we even figure out whether maybe we get to a point where it's like, okay, we're okay. Because after all, Chevron deference is a relatively modern statute, modern precaution.
Yeah.
I mean, Scalia made it. This was something that at the time that it was created, the conservatives on the court wanted, and the non-conservatives were really unhappy about.
And this is what the Supreme Court is supposed to moderate, is these swings from left to right, and the point of view that changes with the wind.
Rooted in reason is why that kind of insulates us from a little bit. So,
well, it does in theory anyway. Yeah.
What about the writing of laws? One impression I have from this is that the burden of specificity becomes much greater legislatively.
So there is an argument that that's supposed to happen. Like the constitutional argument is not crazy, because the Constitution puts the legislative power in the hands of Congress. And if all of a sudden legislation is happening from other branches, that does have a constitutional problem.
I'm not against it.
The problem is the Constitution was written before we had the Industrial Revolution, and so the world we are regulating,
if you're trying to regulate AI,
well,
that's
just
going to be really
anything
hard
in
to do.
Cars, electricity, anything digital,
technology.
So we're in a much bigger country with much more technology, much more going on. You kind of have to empower the regulatory state in order to govern. And so the question, it is a legitimate constitutional question of, okay, given how we set things up and given the reality, how do you merge these two ideas so that you don't want to overly empower the wrong branch of government to do too much legislation, but at the same time, Congress obviously empowered these agencies to do something. So you also don't want to undermine Congress by making it that they tried to empower these agencies, but now the agencies can't do what Congress really wanted them to do.
I mean, I think the deeper story is that you have to assume that these agencies have real experts who understand deeply what's going on here, and who should be relied on to interpret regulations, as opposed to the less expert Congress or courts.
That too.
The Congress would say, hey, look, we trust that the EPA understands what emissions are dangerous and will regulate accordingly. We can't legislate every detail of that. But now they have a little less power to make those decisions. The irony of this, by the way, wasn't the EPA, although the EPA was involved. It was Chevron versus the National Resources Defense Council. Chevron won. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of Chevron, allowing the Reagan administration's industry-friendly EPA to stick with a lax interpretation of the Clean Air Act. Chevron didn't want the Clean Air Act to be so stringent, and they won that case. So I don't understand. I guess because the court at that point said, no, the EPA knows what it's doing. We should let the EPA decide. Even though nowadays we might say, well, they decided in favor of pollution. But see, this is why it's hard to talk about political left and right in this, because it really depends.
Yeah, left and right are taking different preferences as we go through time.
Yeah.
You also have the APA, which is a statutory provision that sort of gives some instructions for how the agencies need to conduct themselves, and
I understand
and sets forth like what happens when they screw up.
Yeah, I understand the point of view that, well, maybe you don't trust Anthony Fauci. Maybe you don't want the CDC to be making decisions about
well, they're
public
not generally
health.
Just doing whatever. There is a statute that guides them,
But
when they wander off
checks
from
and balances.
Well, you can. I mean, that's the other thing. The APA does allow agency actions to be challenged when they screw up. If they're like, for instance, arbitrary and capricious, which I think is one of the standards.
Nimbleness too.
So when that happens, yes, you can bring a challenge.
Mostly, this is just it's destabilizing a regime we've had for about 40 years.
It's destabilizing a regime, and like I pointed out with that other decision, it is possibly poking more holes in the APA, and that it's not just a pendulum swing, but that the whole terrain has more minefields in it than it used to.
Okay.
So I think people are worried that maybe we're not in a position of, okay, we'll just figure out how to do it the old way. I think people are afraid that even the old way may not be acceptable to us.
It's oversimplification, for instance, to say, oh, now no more net neutrality, because it really... It was only 4 years ago that the FCC decided that that Title II did regulate telecommunications companies as common carriers, and now they want to make them information services, or vice versa. I can never even remember. But in both cases, it's kind of the political winds that are deciding that. And one allows net neutrality, or allows the FCC to enforce net neutrality. One doesn't.
Well, to be devil's advocate on some of it, I mean, we're using the Communications Act that by and large was written in 1934.
Yeah.
And there are some questions about what can the FCC actually do. And you can end up in a position where the policy value you may want to pursue may not really have the statutory basis to empower the agency to do the thing that you really wanted to do to get that policy value. And particularly on net neutrality, that's kind of the situation where we find ourselves, where we would like the FCC to... I like net neutrality. I think it's overall a good value, but there is an open question: can the FCC what can it actually do to achieve that?
And in an ideal world, wouldn't this all just land in the lap of Congress? Because those are the elected representatives of there are representatives. They should be the ones making the decision, not an unelected. It
could be a good thing to go back to Congress and say, why don't you update the 1934 statute, which they sort of did in 96 a little bit, and they've done a little bit since. I think part of the problem is, realistically, is that going to happen? Is we're going to have a Congress that's going to actually produce a better statute?
It's kind of undemocratic, though, than to say, well, since we can't get our democratically elected representatives to get off their ass, let's let these unelected agencies do it.
Yeah, but it was also
somewhat
the agencies
undemocratic.
were also a place of expertise, as you said before.
Yeah, but I'm pointing out that the FCC's expertise in 2019 was very different than the expertise.
But that's part of the point, is that things change. Winds change too. They can change.
That's why we want Congress to do it, as opposed to the agencies. I'm maybe a little bit of a devil's advocate here.
Well, this is the creditable argument behind the push to do away with Chevron deference, which is the executive branch agencies we're not constitutionally empowered to do the legislation. Right. So what does it mean if we let them do the legislation anyway? It's a creditable argument. I think the issue, and the point that I was leaking into before, is we had more guardrails to sort of make it that, depending on how the pendulum swung, it couldn't swing too far in any particular direction. And now I think there's a sense that a lot that we've been counting on is unmoored. So, okay, we'll go forth and figure it out, but I think we have a lot more uncertainty about how we will figure it out.
Yeah. And so I mean, one of the things that does happen is that depending which is the party in power, when the party in power, when agencies do what the party in power wants them to do, they're a good thing. As witness Reagan and the EPA, lax, air quality rules, good.
Well, the party in power gets appointments. I mean, they do get some awards to staff a lot of the executive agencies. So that's kind of how we designed it, to say, all right, whichever the people like most, they get to, have a little more power here in this space. But sometimes
So that pendulum does swing.
But sometimes we set it up where some of the appointments pointedly last into other administrations. Right. I mean, there's different ways of trying to get equilibrium so nobody can run away with it.
This is an imperfect system and has been since.
Well, I want to go back to Paris's argument about regulation of bagels.
Regulation
I
of
do
what?
think that's very important.
Bagels.
Should bagels be regulated? No. I think the free market should determine the proper way to bake a bagel.
Bagels should not be allowed.
What?
It's like pineapple on pizza. You just shouldn't allow it. It's heresy.
Wow, so you're
what I'm
advocating for a nanny state, Jeff?
Yes, I am when it comes to bagels. Aren't you?
Yes, I am too. I mean, everything I've just said is out the window when it comes to
The
bagel
most
regulation.
scary words in the world are, I'm from the government and I'm here to regulate your bagels.
I mean, actually, that is probably true because
Well, okay.
nothing like
Food
regulation.
safety
Right
is
now,
one
we've
thing.
got pizza oven regulation in New York, and it's
that's true.
resulted in a coal-burning pizza oven joint near my office being shut for God knows how long. While
Really?
they add their coal filters.
This was a huge problem because the traditional way of making bagels involves burning of coal or wood. And
Yes.
the classic Eastern European bagel is threatened by these governmental regulators,
All right,
these nanny state know-nothings. I'm
I
sorry.
rescind what I just said. No, we should not have government regulation of bagels. We should just we should regulate this via social norms. If you're putting pineapple on your bagels, you shall be scorned.
You should be ostracized.
We should.
Yes.
You have
Well, wait a
people
minute.
have the private First Amendment
What about
right.
a pineapple schmear?
No.
No.
Oh,
Okay,
come on.
imagine the acidity of the pineapple mixing with the baseness of the cream cheese. Disgusting.
Fabulous.
What?
Any fruit? What about any fruit cream cheese? I'm not wildly in favor.
Oh,
I'm
strawberry
not gonna outlaw.
schmears. Come on.
I'm not down
If you
for
could put fish in cream cheese, you could put a strawberry in a cream
Fish
cheese.
and cream
no, the
cheese just go together.
No, so
Yeah, you put the fish on the cream cheese is what you should do.
Well, you could put it in the cream cheese, and then it's
Well,
pink.
It
That's
is
cheating.
sometimes in there.
Often.
Yeah,
It's a
then it is.
schmear.
No, see, strawberry cream cheese looks too much like Lox cream cheese, and I like Lox cream cheese. I do not like
That would be
strawberry cream cheese,
too much of a shock
and this
to
is
the system.
deceiving customers. This is a consumer protection problem.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's a product liability issue.
Harris
exactly.
brought us back to earth.
I think
yes.
you should be able to have your bagel any way you want it, but I don't think that you should have a bagel that is not boiled then baked. I mean, that really is
True.
That's true. What is
It's not a bagel.
What other bagels are people making?
Oh, you know these people at Noah's Bagels
Yeah,
and
they
stuff?
steam 'em, I think.
Yeah, they're terrible. Oh, they're
Oh,
awful.
California.
They're bready. They're bready.
Rough.
You want a bagel to be a sinker. You want it to be so dense and heavy that you walk funny after you eat it. That's what you want.
In one of the few very New York things that has happened to me and I guess many New York things that has happened to me and my friend groups is one of my friends for the last couple of years has been living over a bagel shop in my neighborhood. Love it. They have really great bagel
They
sandwiches.
know when they're
My
fresh
friend,
and hot, right?
Paul, he's a big pizza oven guy. There's also a pizza oven place there. And he's like, Paris, it doesn't count as a bagel shop because they don't bake their bagels on premises. And I'm like, how do you know that they don't bake their bagels on premises? And I also don't think that discounts it because there are great bagel sandwiches. And we did a months-long stakeout. He was out there every day walking the dog, looking to see if bagels were being delivered. He's like, they aren't. I emailed the person who owned it, no response. I eventually got the answer, I think, through like some third party that they bust their bagels in from a bagel shop, farther down in Brooklyn. And that apparently made it.
You know, Paris
not
is
a
the
bagel.
new Seinfeld show.
I know.
I am.
She and her friends need
So-
to be the next show.
In a related story, Lisa and I went to a new French restaurant in town, actually in Santa Rosa, that was fantastic. It was amazing. And we often judge the restaurant by the bread. That's the first thing you see. And if it's bad, dry, not
And if
made
they
on
charge you
premises,
for it.
Everybody charges you for it now in California.
They do?
Actually,
Really?
many do, but these guys didn't.
That's so Italian.
They put a
of them.
classic, crusty, unsliced baguette on the table with amazing French butter, and I thought, this is good. And it was perfect. It was a perfect. I felt like I was in Paris, and I said, this is great. You guys must bake your own bread. They say, no. We go down to Grossman's Deli, and they bake the bagels. I mean, the baguettes. So you can never be sure. You can never
It's
be sure.
devastating.
I once walked into a Dunkin' Donuts looking for a donut I like because my favorite donut was really hard to find in the Boston area, even though there's a Dunkin' Donuts
What?
like every 20 feet. I really like chocolate cream-filled donuts. I grew up eating them in New
They've gotten
Jersey.
rid of so many
They've gotten
donuts
so many.
now.
However, the place, ironically, I'll get to the irony. But so we walked in, there had been some correlation of whether they made the donuts on site or had them delivered with whether they would have it or not. So we walked into a Dunkin' Donuts to ask if they had them, and they said, no, we don't have them. And just to test out this theory, I said, do you make your donuts on site or do you have them delivered? And the guy says, I don't know where the donuts come from. And there was something just so stunning of a guy working in a donut shop who really has no idea where.
They just
did you
arrived.
look behind that door that's sitting over there to see if somebody was making donuts or not? And I just, so we were kind of stunned and I walked away. But the irony is that I can actually get chocolate cream-filled donuts about a mile and a half down the road from here at the Dunkin' Donuts in Petaluma.
I can't get a peanut donut anymore. There's no peanut donuts.
It's apparently Patrick Delahanty confirms they do have them at the Petaluma Dunkin'.
Yes. Where do you think I'm stopping off after the show?
Patrick says you cannot find chocolate cream-filled donuts anywhere on the East Coast, but you can get them in Petaluma.
You can get them in Petaluma.
I rest my case.
There's like,
you know why?
I will say, the only Dunkin' Donuts I see regularly is one of my friends in Bushwick lives near a Dunkin' Donuts that is attached to a gas station in the middle of a residential neighborhood, which is very weird in Brooklyn to just suddenly have a gas station and a Dunkin' Donuts. But I'll check for them next time I'm there.
See, Leo, now you know why I like to come up to do the show.
Oh, you come for the donuts.
I come for the donuts.
Stay for the Google, but you come for the donuts.
Right.
So I think it's because of the free market, because we have other independent donut joints in town, and Dunkin' here has got to compete.
Right. So
with
they got to bring out the
Kenny's,
best donuts.
With one end, Kenny's.
Yeah.
And then isn't there a donut place just over here? I think there is. There's a donut place. There's a number of independent donut shops. By the way, every one of them has a bubbling fryer that they squirt donuts into. They make their own. They know where they come from, believe me. Okay. They can smell them. Okay, well, you're watching This Week in Donuts, apparently.
That was good. We needed that.
This Week in Baked Goods.
I like that we all were immediately ready to talk about donuts.
Right.
Yes.
You know, I think this is... So, okay, you're watching This Week in Google. Paris Martineau, Jeff Jarvis, the wonderful Kathy Gellis, and more in a moment. We're back. One of the things I love about this show is... whether it's a foreskin or a donut. So I was gone last week, and apparently all hell broke out.
It was only in the last 5 minutes.
All
That's
right.
when we're allowed to have a bit of fun around the
Did
house.
Micah survive? Did Micah just wanted to go hide afterwards?
You know, I was mad at him because the show was better without me. And that's not, I'm sorry, that's not allowed.
It was all to Paris's credit. So you know where the story came from.
Yes. I saw the original story, and we would have done it too. I think I probably bookmarked it.
It was on there.
Yeah.
The scientists, for those of you who weren't here last week, used human cells to make a smiling face out of humans.
Very creepy.
Not a few kinds, like supermarket. Time to make the donut. But up to 52 varieties.
Leo's still back with the donuts.
Time to make the donut. I made the donut. Dunkin' Donuts, up to 52 varieties.
Look for a chocolate cream.
anymore.
There it is. There it is. I see it. All right. We were just checking. Continue
We
on.
interrupt this conversation about foreskin, too.
So the story was fascinating and creepy and weird enough as is, but then Paris
So my
was her
immediate
nose for
question,
news.
whenever you bring up
did the
a
research.
story about using human
She
cells
is.
to make a weird little flesh face, I'm
Yes.
like, whose cells are those? And we
Where did
did
they
some
come from?
poking around. We were looking through the little study, trying to find whose cells they were. And then if you watch the recording, there's like a good minute or two where Jeff and Mike are talking about something else and I am silent. And that is because I am control Fing through the whole thing to be like, cells, samples. I eventually find what I think is the description of where the cells are from. So it seems to be a place where you can buy cells. I look it up. I just Google the phrase straight into Google. Hey, Google, this is a show about Google. And I come up with the answer and immediately realize the description is very funny. And I give you guys a warning. I'm like, listen, it might derail us us a bit. Do you want to hear this? And you're both like, no, I totally want to hear it.
Derail
And
us.
the
How do you
answer
even?
was,
How can you even tell if it's what's it?
We went from the Supreme Court to donuts.
So yeah, it was
Yeah.
about robots. See, first of all, you're making a robot. Don't put human skin on it.
Yeah.
That's a
very
little
creepy.
too Hannibal Lecter
Yeah.
for me. That's just weird. Metal's fine.
Right, because that's the only thing that we really wanted to have to
Yeah.
make the robot more
Right.
cuddly.
Yeah, we just wanted him to be.
Right.
But that, by the way, if you saw the picture,
I saw the
not
picture,
cuddly.
not cuddly.
Cuddly.
not cuddly. Your worst nightmare.
So then Paris inserts her news flash to Micah and me, and it was beyond belief.
Yes.
We couldn't
No, I
believe that
understand. You couldn't
this
stop.
was true.
You couldn't-
Yeah, it was amazing.
It was
and
amazing.
we laughed and laughed and laughed. It was great.
Did you know this is 1 year, the 1 year anniversary of Threads, July 5th? It arrived in the App Store. Meta's Threads.
okay, do you guys use Threads?
No.
Yes.
Jeff uses them
Jeff?
all, though, to be fair.
I use them
But
all.
that doesn't count. Do you browse Threads?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Ooh, I don't.
And each one is different. Threads, user interface for interaction sucks. But there's a lot. The journalists went there, so there's a lot of people I'm interested in who are on Threads.
But the problem with Threads is the problem with all Meta properties these days. They want to be TikTok.
Politics.
Well, and they refuse politics. They want to be TikTok. Now, maybe there are those who say, you guys should refuse politics. But look, this is my Threads. This is basically a feed of videos.
Oh God, mine looks nothing like that.
Well,
How many people
am
do you
I
follow?
following the wrong people? I don't know.
Yeah, I have nothing like
So
this.
your
Nothing.
Threads is text heavy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I wish I could show it to you. Yeah, it's all text, and it's Dave Pell and Shannon Watts and Joyanne Reed and Siva Vaidyanathan and Andrew Weissman and Jill Weinbachs and
Oh, I'm not
Brendan
logged in.
Nyhan.
That's why.
News.
You know what? I
Oh.
wasn't logged in. So this is the feed you see when you're not.
Okay, I am logged in, and the first thing it's showing me is a vertical video from TikTok.
Yeah. That's the problem, I think.
Then
and
another
Instagram's
video.
even worse.
Yeah.
Mine is completely different. It's weird.
Well, let me log in.
Here's Zuck saying Threads now has more than 175 million monthly actives. What a year. Adam Massari, it's hard to believe it's been a year. A huge props to the Feds team.
That was the story. 1 year in, and now what is actually that's a large number because
Well,
Well.
that's the question, though. And I do remember talking to our Meta and Facebook and Instagram reporters, Sylvia Varnum O'Regan, about this a couple of months ago when Meta first debuted their first big monthly active Threads user, because that phrase immediately caught my eye, and I was like, what does a monthly active user mean? Because if you're scrolling through the actual Instagram app, you may notice that all of a sudden there's a Threads interstitial on there that has some Threads posts and you can thumb through, but it's in the Instagram app. I was curious, does looking at that or pausing on it count me as an active Threads user,
Probably.
even if I don't open the Threads account? Probably. So I think we have to kind of add an asterisk to that monthly active user number.
I don't think we've ever had good definitions about what those statistics
plus I
necessarily
think
mean.
as Benny have pointed out, Threads is really Instagram. Like it's really those are Instagram users who somehow see Threads.
They all got kind of signed up.
Yeah, and I see Threads in my Instagram. Don't you?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And I bet that part of
That
that
counts.
interaction might
Yeah.
count.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Benito. Also, Meta has never been honest about their numbers. So,
Right. Right.
I do
Yeah.
like that they were built on a federatable platform, or at least in theory. I like that idea, but I'm not entirely sure I like the expectations they had for their service or how people would engage with the service.
Yeah.
Well, that was exciting.
Yeah, July 5th, you said.
July 5th. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Huey Lewis.
Oh.
Yes,
He was born on the 5th, not the 4th?
right, the 5th.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, as we know, that's really all that matters.
That's why I'm bringing it up.
Kathy World.
There is another
It's
Meta.
in the real world for everybody.
How dare I?
Yes, exactly.
Meta created a Supreme Court for content, says the Washington Post. Then it threatened its funds. We've been talking about the Meta Oversight Board since it created
I think
it.
threatened the funds is a little strong, but
According to the Washington Post, last summer the situation was dire for Meta's Oversight Board. Meta, its sole founder, had privately threatened to pull back support, pushing the board to cut costs or seek new sources of revenue.
Because how they spend this much money, I don't know. Well, they tried to argue from the beginning they had a belief that they could sell their services as a court for Twitter and other social platforms.
Oh, boy.
So they tried to find, according to the Post's YouTube, new clients, including YouTube, TikTok, Pinterest, and a host of other tech companies without much luck. What did they spend? That is, I mean,
Well, that's the thing. So they have, I don't know, a dozen members, and they get paid, I think, decently for part-time gigs. And they have a staff to go through the millions of things and pick the few that they deal with. But it's like $170 million, something like that. How could they have spent this much?
That is really
get that.
astounding.
It is.
So Meta put $130 million into an independent trust in 2019 for the board to use for the next 6 years. 3 years later, they had to add another $150 million donation. So it's a total of $280
So $300 million, if it were an endowment, what's 5% of $300 million?
Yeah, that's a lot of money to spend. It's
a great
over
question.
it's millions a year, right? So the Oversight Board was really there to deflect criticism of Meta, because Meta was going to say, well, no, but we have this independent board of journalists and experts, and they're telling us what we should do about this content. Has Meta been, has there been enough volume to justify that spend?
Well, I said, no, there's tons of volume of potential cases.
But yeah, they don't
only
see
pick a
that
few.
many. Yeah, they handle
And they
a
don't see
few.
that many. And Meta has generally gone along with.
That was my second question. So they have gone along with the
it.
recommendations.
Oh yeah, they've done it. They've done it. Now there's wiggle room on various cases.
Well, honestly,
depends on how
Meta
it's written.
wants to go along with it because it deflects criticism
Not our
from
fault.
them. They can, yes. It's really no, they're doing it. We're not doing
So
it.
the latest decision that I saw was, I forget the word. Is it Shaheen? What means martyr in Arabic? And Meta
Right.
had stopped the word from being used because it was used in so many contexts, and they want an easy way to moderate. And the Oversight Board said, no, that's not good. And Meta agreed, and they changed the
So
policy.
Shahid is
And you
back.
can now say the word again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The board also faced criticism, again, the Washington Post, from some academics and tech policy analysts that it's slow-moving, issuing too few consequential decisions with broad impacts in the industry. The Oversight Board has acknowledged that its decisions arrive after the 90-day deadline. They miss deadlines. Last year, they pledged to increase their speed, expediting some decisions and offering summary decisions made by a 5-member panel without a full vote. The
board completed more than 50 cases in 2023.
Yeah, that's less than one a week.
It's like
given
there's
the-
5 people. How are they consuming that much money?
Yeah.
Well, I
it's
think
5 people of a subset of the board is 5 people. The board is larger.
Yeah.
They have to fly around a lot in private jets, maybe? I don't know.
I mean, I think at the time that they were launched, there was a little bit more largesse in Silicon Valley where you had to throw money at smart people to get them. So I think it was being competitive with that environment, and there might have been more largesse built into it than they needed to, but it was also probably a much more expensive proposition than people realize as well.
Well, it's mainly staff. I think, Paris, and I don't... what my understanding is, it is a part-time gig. And I don't know what the expectation is. It's not even half-time for the members of the board, and I think they make low 6 figures for that.
Yeah.
Not a bad gig.
Not for nothing.
Yeah.
It's nothing to sneeze at. But I posted something in the bottom of the rundown of a post I wrote in 2021. I filed a comment for the Copia Institute in one of their cases. But the post talks about some ambivalence in engaging with the Oversight Board, because I think some of the expectations when the board was launched was, I'm not sure quite how to phrase it exactly, that it would be a little more authoritative as almost like a form of private law, as opposed to
a
a
Supreme
form.
Court for the Facebook.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind if Facebook basically Facebook has moderation judgment, as we've been discussing earlier in the show, and I don't mind if Facebook basically wants to outsource its moderation judgment to this other entity. But the concern a little bit was that the Oversight Board would be speaking in some sort of authoritative way that was like the one true way of moderation that might apply to more platforms. And I was also a little worried about what the expectations were, and it came from a comment of, as the Oversight Board was coming together, people were kind of coming up to me and saying, you could get some business if you actually like presented cases in front of the Oversight Board. And I'm kind of like, I don't think that's what I went to law school to do. I mean,
so is part of the problem that they wanted it to apply to more than just Facebook?
I mean, I don't know if there actually was a problem. I don't know if there's a problem with Facebook. I don't know if there's a problem with the Oversight Board. But I think there were some expectations surrounding it at launch that...
You said it should be called the Facebook Oversight Board.
Oh, I didn't like that.
Not just the Oversight
Board. That too,
Board.
yeah. I mean, I thought that Mike's blog has, Mike can change his style book however he wants, but I like to call it the Facebook Oversight Board because I did not like even the way they were self-referencing that the Oversight Board is the one true way. And, that doesn't even work across platforms because different platforms have different communities and different needs and expectations. So I don't think it's bad in terms of what it does, but I was worried that people wanted it to or expected or thought it did more or could do more than it actually was. I think it's valuable enough on its face, but I didn't like those extra things that people were imposing on it.
Right. Well, apparently it's not all that effective, and it's very expensive, and I don't know. It's better. I think I thought this when they announced it. It's really just somebody they can scapegoat, frankly.
The other thing I've argued too. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I think it does have, it's been interesting to sort of play out because the way we're kind of tuning it out is actually kind of interesting. It can make a difference, but it's also not driving, but I don't know. I think Facebook also gets criticized for it can help exonerate them, but if they're just going to ignore it anyway, then it's not really offloading, being a lightning rod for them anyway.
The real problem is it's an intractable problem. There's no way to solve.
Shall we quote Mike Masnick now?
We can.
The Mike Masnick impossibility theorem is, Kathy?
Content moderation is impossible to do at scale.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there's no more scale.
I'm scared for
Facebook.
you there, Kathy.
Facebook has, 2.5 billion, something like that, monthly active users. I mean, you can't get a bigger scale than that. And in how many different languages? 40, 50 languages?
That is, I think, one of the bigger problems that any platform is facing because you not only need the language skills, but you also really need to know
the subtlety.
The subtlety and the local.
It's not enough to know Shahid. You have to know how it's used.
It's so local. Yeah. And it's really hard to build teams with that level of expertise.
It may be the real issue is that our notion of social media, a kind of an overarching social media, whether it's Twitter or Facebook, is really out of date.
I think it was never right or healthy in the first place. I think it's much more interesting if we think about it in terms of self-publishing and that, these are really like just content management systems for the things that we have to say, but we've imposed on them some expectations of community and enclosure, also because we ended up on such cloistered platforms which were so self-contained. I think one of the things that's really exciting about all the open protocols is that Jeff shouldn't have to post 5 times. He should be able to post in one context and we should be able to pull it together depending on what our appetite is, and then we just have different we have reading technologies, we have interchange technologies, we have DM technologies, and some sort of way of just tying them together in an easy way. My posting 180 characters at a time or 212 or whatever we're up to, I think that's more valuable than Twitter necessarily is.
Well, we live in a new world, don't we? I, for one, welcome our new overlords, the Supreme Court of the United States of America.
Buckle up.
Yeah, we got them.
Okay, show of hands. How many people really want Kathy to talk about this decision? They do. We want you to. So when you were here on Sunday, that decision had not been made yet.
Are we speaking of the one I took?
Decision.
The big one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know some of you are saying no, that's politics. But is it politics when it could conceivably change the landscape entirely?
The problem of it is, I think that's basically the analysis. Like, No, I don't want to have the political discussion either. But I also, and I was talking to you before we started the show, that I think it was before we started rolling, I went to law school, and I think everything I learned has just been rendered obsolete.
Yeah.
And that is a very scary thing, not just personally.
Is
but
that because the fundamental tenet of constitutional law in our country, maybe even going back to the Magna Carta, is that no man is above the law?
That's a fundamental thing. I'm even thinking just in terms of how like I was saying, the NetChoice decision is reasoned and rooted. And then I also pointed out how we're getting those other those other courts are deciding to enjoin the age verification laws on a First Amendment basis, and they were able to do it without even the NetChoice case being announced because they were looking at the same precedent and it was reasoned and rooted. I think the problem is there's a lot that's been coming out which has been so. Maybe where I veered off before was trying to focus on the motivations of any of the jurists in terms of what they wrote and how they wrote it. You could have John Roberts, who wrote the decision, could have been as well-intentioned as possible, and I think even if he meant well, he still wrote us something that's going to be incredibly problematic. It's not as reasoned, it's not as rooted, and it blows up a lot more that we were counting on to sort of give us some rules of the road by which we can test things when we have actual issues.
Is there any way to come back from this?
I don't know. It's going to be a long, hot summer where we're going to be processing a whole lot. I have to think about it. Other colleagues I respect have to think about it.
Where
Everybody
would be a
needs to
good
think
place
about it.
to go to hear this conversation as it's ongoing? I've heard some people say the subreddit Supreme Court is a good place.
I'm not familiar with it, but maybe. I don't know. This is so fresh. I mean, I'm losing track of time. These decisions came out 2 days ago.
Yeah.
I haven't fully digested them all myself, so I'm going to pace myself a little bit. I'm reading some commentators who I normally respect. For instance, Chris Geidner
Love Chris Geidner.
He's got an excellent blog.
Okay.
Steve Vladeck has another SCOTUS watching blog. You can start there. They're not necessarily
Chris
conversations,
Geidner's the
but
law
they're
dork, so his Substack is called Law Dork.
Yeah, I've known him. I don't know if we've ever met, but I was an early law blogger and he was an early law blogger, so I kind of know him from the law blogging space.
Yeah.
I think we were in
He's
law
been around a
school
long
around the same time.
Yeah.
These are people who, I think they're grappling with this because it's really throwing everything they understood up in the air, and they're trying to figure out everything I thought I know, what I knew, what is left. And so a lot of people are assessing it. But basically, it's a bit of a red flag where all these people who are like, I'm comfortable at the Supreme Court, I'm comfortable litigating at the Supreme Court. I'm not just speaking for me, but all these people. If they're throwing up these comments of, oh my gosh, this is different, those are important red flags that we need to adhere. So I think the caution is don't just gloss over it. But there's obviously also a huge inertia that we don't want to deal with this kind of upheaval. So there's going to, even with the Chevron case, we're going to probably try to muddle forward as best we can because we want that result. I don't think we want to upend everything we know about the United States and its rule of law. It's if you look at the mechanics and what we can count on, it's not going to be as easy as we thought it was before.
There are those who do want to upend the institutions. And my argument has been that conservatives used to conserve institutions. Now they want to upend them. Progressives used to want to change institutions. Now they're in the position of having to defend them. Everything is upside down. But part of the aim of some people, look at Steve Bannon, I don't want to get political, but there definitely is a faction that is institutionally insurrectionist, that wants to destroy the institutions. That's the goal.
Why?
And so you've got to deal with that then.
Why do you think?
I think it is different. I agree with Jeff that it's upside down from how it was, but I think things used to be sort of upside down within one center of containment, where nobody really wanted to blow up everything completely. They just wanted to kind of push the bounds of certain things that we accepted.
I've always been a Democrat and a liberal, but I also felt like I could talk to conservatives and Republicans. But what's happening now is not it's not conservative, it's radical.
No, I think you're saying, I don't know if I would have said that liberals wanted to blow up the institutions. They wanted to modify them, they wanted to evolve them, but I don't think they wanted to destroy it. And
but we recognized that there was a process and that we were in favor of the rule of law and the process.
I mean, some of this is a scrum for power. You know, a lot of the institutionalization.
A lot of it is a scrum for power.
It's a scrum for power, and a lot of the institutional rules that we had were basically designed to make sure that power would be checked.
Yeah.
It is difficult if people are just playing for the power and blowing up the things that prevented them from having too much because they're going to get it. But then what? Because can the United States legal system function if it's just a power play?
Here's a podcast I've heard. I haven't listened to, but I will. I've added it to my list from the National Constitution Center that is apparent. That is, I am told, very not only erudite but unbiased. We the People with Jeffrey Rosen. So that if you like podcasts, this might be one to listen to as well.
Security. It's security. You can advertise here because it's security.
Yeah.
That's right.
Actually, and one of the things I might add to that is there are some people who I think do want to blow stuff up, and I think there's some people who don't, but are just not being careful and not realizing how much they are putting at risk. And maybe I would even put that decision in that category where I don't really need to impose a viewpoint on what I thought Roberts was trying to accomplish. It doesn't really matter what I think he was trying to accomplish. But even if he thought he was doing the right thing that was serving the Constitution, the thinking was just too small and it didn't play out what the implications are, and he needed to be more careful.
All right, we'll move on from that. I can't have Kathy Gullis sit here and not find out what she thinks about all of that.
I want to be able to give analysis that's meaningful. I want my degree to matter.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Yeah, fair, completely fair. And
but you can also practice before the Oversight Board and be
That's
happy
true.
about it.
Yeah, it turns out I had a plan B all along.
Yeah.
Let's see. Good news. President Biden has decided to host a conference for social media creators.
And they're threatening to boycott it, I think.
Are they really?
A whole bunch were.
TikTok.
Oh,
Yeah.
great.
And
I'm not
Gaza.
I mean, fine, go ahead, host it. There's a part of me that wishes I would be invited to it, but
You're not a TikTok, YouTube star.
No, but
You're a
they're
creator,
wrong about
Leo.
certain things, and Biden is wrong about certain things. I mean, Biden banned TikTok. That was not bright.
Which is an interesting combination, right? In August, the White House will host the first ever White House Creator Economy Conference. A group of influential social media personalities, no one I know, and industry professionals, again, no one I know, will be invited to discuss issues like data privacy, fair pay, AI, and mental health with senior White House officials. And of course, what's the best thumbnail to put on your YouTube video? Christian Tom, the director of the White House Office of Digital Strategy, announced the news on stage at VidCon on Friday. You didn't go to VidCon, Jeff. You like VidCon, I know.
I didn't this year, no.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose this has a giant "how do you do, fellow kids"
Yes,
aspect
exactly.
to it.
Hi, fellow kids. Who is boycotting it? That's fascinating.
There are people unhappy with Gaza.
Because of Palestine?
Gaza and TikTok.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it is a little two-faced to say we're going to ban TikTok, and oh, by the way, fellow kids, come on over to the White House. So
I think that is unfortunate, but
The appeals.
But not only that, the Democratic National Convention is going to open up media credentials to influencers. Oh, I'm old enough to remember when it was a big deal that bloggers got credentials.
Yeah.
And now influencers are going.
Wow. I used to be an influencer, you know.
I used to be someone.
Back in the day.
I could have been an influencer.
Could have been an influencer. But instead, I'm nothing. Let's talk about the Internet Archive. They went before a 3-judge panel on Friday to defend their controlled digital lending practices. We talked about this on Sunday, Kathy, but I think you can reiterate a little bit. The Internet Archive, which we love, founded by Brewster Kahle, archives most of the Internet, but it turns out it's also scanning books. And during COVID, they had an emergency library in which you could borrow books because you couldn't go to your real library.
Well, they always have the library. They've had the library for years. But
they changed the rules.
So the original library, which follows the protocol called controlled digital lending. I don't know if they refer to it as a protocol, but controlled digital lending is basically, okay, the library had a book. They could either hand somebody the physical book to go read, or they scanned a copy of it and kept the physical on their shelf, but handed somebody the electronic copy to go read. Not that it's in a version that they can't keep; they have to then bring it back. And you could do that one for one. So you could only give out as many electronic copies as you actually had physical books sitting on the shelf. That was their ordinary library, whose name I'm blanking on, but I think it may have been Open Library or something like that. But then when the pandemic happened and nobody could get to any library ever to get any physical books, they're like, well, this is a big problem. This is extenuating circumstances. So they did what they called the National Emergency Library, which is they took off that limit. So anybody who needed the book could get an electronic copy of the book because they really needed to read it because kids were in school and needed to learn, and we got to give them something. But that only lasted a couple of months. But doing that poked the bear. So the publishers probably didn't like the old school library, the older form of the library they had, and they really hated the National Emergency Library, and so they sued the Internet Archive over both. And won with a really unfortunate and I think very confused opinion at the district court that did a fair use analysis that I think really did not understand how to apply the fair use analysis. It's been a while since I've read it, so I can't quite tell you exactly what I'm complaining about.
Hachette, HarperCollins, Penguin Random House, and Wiley said that the Internet Archive's open library provided a way for libraries to avoid paying ebook licensing fees, and that these were substantial forms of income for the publishers.
So it's true that they're not paying for the electronic form of the books, but they are paying for the real version of the books.
Penguin says ebook licensing is worth $59 million a year to them. Those licensing fees mostly paid by aggregators like Overdrive and Livy. And they say that's an important part of our, our revenue.
Yeah, but
with the Internet Archive, they're not paying us for these books, but they are buying a copy and scanning it.
So
a library buys a copy.
And lends it out.
Yeah. So what's really, I think there's a really insidious argument that is getting credited by the publishers, which is that they're claiming in certain ways that copyright doesn't give them the right to control a copy. They're almost arguing that copyright gives them the right to control a market. That if the ebook market is its own thing capable of producing revenue, that nobody may play in that market that they were entitled to play in themselves. And it should not matter because the book is still being bought. It's just they're buying the first one. And the fact that the first one got transformed into something electronic with a lot of extenuating circumstances that vindicates all the values that First Amendment is supposed to protect, that shouldn't matter. The fact that, we could have sold you the ebooks. Well, they're not selling the ebooks, number one, because they're using licensing and you don't end up owning anything that you get through the ebooks anyway. But no, the fact that the Internet Archive they had a book that they were allowed to lend, and the fact that they were lending the copy electronically instead of physically, it's really unfathomable that the publishers are saying that the fact that you lent it electronically instead of physically when it is still the same copy that you bought is somehow an offense to us.
Maybe
and it's a right of what's the right called, Kathy? The
right to read, right to.
That we talked about. But no, the fact when I buy something, I can do with it what I want.
I don't think you're saying for sale, maybe, but
well, kind of for sale. It's a for sale doctrine, isn't it? Right? I bought it.
Yeah. Now libraries. So one of the things that came up at oral argument is libraries are a little bit different because there's certain statutory protection that explicitly covers libraries and their ability to lend, but one of the arguments was, well, okay, the fact that libraries have the benefit of that statute does not fully exhaust all the protections that libraries would have under the copyright statute.
Is it public and private libraries both?
I think it's open, and the Internet Archive certainly says we are a library in every way that being a library matters.
So, in fact, what the Internet Archive did, they partnered with libraries, including 13 public libraries, to provide an alternate path for digital lending without paying licensing fees. Instead of arguing, as you just did, they decided to take kind of a page from the book that piracy and advocates use, that, well, we didn't really harm your revenues. Internet Archive said, rather than cutting into your ebook licensing revenues, the Open Library helped promote books and that practice ended up generating more licensing revenues for publishers in recent years. They argued that overdrive checkouts did not increase when they stopped lending the disputed books in the lawsuit. The court did not buy that argument, and that's why they had to take 500,000 books offline.
I mean, I think one of the arguments that Internet Archive went back to over and over again at the oral argument of the appeal is that, the financial harm was really overstated.
Right.
But also, I've bought books that I read via the Internet Archive. Like, this is kind of how things work normally.
The judges in the original case didn't buy this argument, so I'm surprised that they're continuing to pursue it.
Copyright
the data show that clearly, that exposure leads to sales.
Yeah. Right. And they were complaining that because the Internet Archive had a link to buy now and got grants, that it was commercial. The problem is copyright is a complicated statute that ends up, every time you run the fair use analysis, ends up getting kind of twisted and things get confused. People end up confusing like the fourth factor on commerciality. I think that's the fourth factor, but they take all these factors and they get so imbued in figuring out the fourth factor that it ends up subsuming the entire analysis of whether fair use applied. One of the reasons I'm so disappointed with that, going back to the Supreme Court, the Warhol decision, was it did not mention the First Amendment, and fair use is partly how you get copyright to comport with the First Amendment. Because the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law, and that includes copyright law. You cannot make copyright law if it conflicts with the First Amendment. And one of the ways, and this is stuff that Justice Breyer has written about, one of the ways you keep copyright law consistent with the First Amendment is you have fair use, because it protects and encourages discourse. And to have written Warhol a fair use decision and never mention the First Amendment, I think was
well, that's my point, is that instead they're focusing on economic impact instead of saying, there's a fair use here. There is a petition on change.org to let readers read an open letter to the publishers in Hachette versus Internet Archive. And one of the points they make, which I think is maybe more compelling, I don't know if it would be for a court, is that those books provide access to books to lower income families, people with disabilities who can't make it to a library, rural communities that increasingly don't have libraries, and LGBTQ plus people who may be afraid to check out a book.
Since this litigation, exponentially more books have been banned. Like at the time that the lawsuit was filed, we hadn't really lit that up, but since it's been filed, hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of books have been banned, which I think really drives home the fair use point. And there was a really, I heard one argument in passing, and I wasn't fully focused on the publishers at oral argument, but one of the arguments in passing was like, they were so focused on copyright essentially gives us the entitlement to incentivize us to keep creating things. And all these amici kept talking about the public interest, but it's not about the public interest. It's about us being incentivized in order to produce works for society's benefit. So it was like, no, it's not about the public interest. It's about us for the public interest.
Yeah. Ashley Belanger, writing in Ars Technica, said judges appeared, this is in the appeal, primarily focused on understanding how their Internet Archive's digital lending potentially hurts publishers' profits, rather than how publishers' costly ebooks licensing potentially harms readers. But at the same time, you're right. I think this is a misreading of what copyright is all about. But honestly, our courts are there to protect property, not, right?
I mean, we did just get a very nice First Amendment decision out of the Supreme Court.
That's true.
So no, they do protect the public interest, but it's not a question of whether the ebook, I'm not sure that article caught it quite right, because the Internet Archive wasn't doing what it was doing because the ebook licenses are so exploitative.
Right.
It was doing it because it's a thing it's allowed to do. It had a book and it lent it. It just happened to have lent it in a way that could be usable, because what have you vindicated as a library if you've got all the books and they're stuck on your shelves and people can't get there? That people being able to physically access the copy really shouldn't be something that copyright requires. It's not even in the statute.
Well, the judges decided not to make a decision.
Oh, they wouldn't at oral argument.
No, so we're not going to know how this shakes out until early fall.
And this is a story that keeps going
Yeah.
I don't know. When I testified before the U.S. Senate, at one point Blumenthal scolds me and says, "You're going to expand fair use so much there's no copyright." It's the opposite. They're going to expand copyright so much there's no fair use anymore.
That's their goal.
Yeah.
And I attended a virtually the Sharp conference, which is the book historian wonks conference that's now in England, where I wish I were. Not that I'd rather be here with you, but it's wonky for me. And there was a really interesting presentation from a professor in London who said that the fear is in all the fight over AI now that open culture is going to be hurt badly because there's going to be this backlash. There is this backlash pushing copyright up so much more in so many more ways that we're going to find that AI is going to be just fed by the junk that you can get, and open culture gets shut down more and more and more. And I think that's one of the risks we have in this whole discussion. Is big bad tech companies are doing things, or nice guys in Internet Archive are doing things, and big old media companies, whether they're book companies, and Hachette is my publisher, and newspapers certainly are trying to extend copyright and diminish fair use. And it's a constant fight, and Hollywood tries to do it. It's a constant fight to try to keep some measure of openness in our culture.
If Hachette is your publisher, and you can decline to answer this question, but are they in the position to sue on your behalf? If your book was scanned in the Internet Archive, could they?
Well, my desire is to give the Internet Archive a copy of my book.
Okay.
You hold the copyright, though, not Hachette.
I do, but I've licensed it to them, so I don't know, Kathy. Hello, counselor. You tell me.
I don't know.
We have to look at your contract. Yeah. And to do that, I think Kathy needs some chocolate-filled donuts.
But it's just sort of, we talked about this on Twit, like these platforms are deciding the rules of the road for everybody. They're deciding the markets. They're deciding how much we want to accommodate. Like, they're deciding for all authors. Not just you, not just their authors, but it is going to decide it for every author. Because either they're going to obliterate.
I hope you mean publisher. It's not just the platforms, it's the publishers.
They're deciding, every author that they claim to be standing in for, they're doing it for them, and they're doing it for every other author. Because if you obliterate the Internet Archive, then nobody gets to be there.
Corinne McSherry from the Electronic Frontier Foundation, who was arguing on behalf of the Internet Archive, noted that fair use is designed to ensure that copyright actually serves the public interest, not publishers' interest.
Yeah. I'm not sure she did the oral argument. I think it was Joe Gratz.
Gratz was, but she, let's see, they were both.
But she may be
both involved
counsel for
somehow.
yeah.
Lawyers representing IA, Joseph C. Gratz from the law firm Morris & Forrester, and Corinne McSherry from the EFF. Both confirmed judges were highly engaged by IA's defense, so that's a good sign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was worried that one of the judges was having a harder time getting her head around what CDL actually did than some of the others.
Yeah. That's interesting. We will wait. And of course, this isn't the end of it. No matter how it goes, it probably will continue on to the Supreme Court. I don't think Hachette or the IA is going to give up.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
What would the Supreme Court do?
I don't know, but I mean, I would write a brief. So.
One does not know.
Well, I'll tell you, I was upset that they didn't seem to take on board the amicus brief I wrote in the Warhol, and I basically repurposed what I wrote in Warhol for the Internet Archive case, which was pointing out that what I was just talking about, that the First Amendment and fair use have to be able to get along, and that copyright law needs to be interpreted both consistent with the First Amendment and also consistent with the Progress Clause of if you accidentally doing something that is going to choke progress, you have done copyright wrong, and in a way that the Constitution wouldn't allow.
Here we are halfway through the show, more than halfway through, and we haven't even mentioned AI.
Halfway?
More than halfway.
Yeah, you should have seen Paris's look.
Well,
really?
Okay, we got a little more. There's a little more. It's only an hour and a half in, Paris. Are you craving a bagel with pineapple schmear?
Nobody is.
Nobody is.
Nobody is. No one in the face of humanity.
This Week in AI coming up next. You're watching This Week in Google. AI stories. You put in a couple. I think this looks like a Jeff Jarvis, given that you're going to a font class next week.
No, you put this in last week, and that's why I carried it over.
Oh, I put this in
I asked
llama.ttf.
Micah whether this was his, and he said, I don't know what this is.
True type
and so
font,
I
which
carried
is
it over
also
because it's so fascinating.
an AI large language model and inference engine. What? Yeah, I did put this in. So
What is it?
It's a font, but because of the way that some font carriers can deal with ligatures and put FI and FL in, so on and so forth, it has software in it that can do other things. So this smart character embedded llama into a font. So when you type in the font will do generative AI things. If you go to 6 minutes
Wait,
in.
what does that mean? The font will do.
So
generative
he's
AI
writing.
things?
So here, I'll turn it on because this is the guy who created it. It's
font
not.
that
It's
we made. It's called llama.
It's wonky as hell.
It's wonky, but really the thing you need to understand is that fonts, TrueType fonts, but most fonts are actually little programs, and TrueType fonts can actually call WebAssembly, and so he's actually in the font code. He's written a call. If you type certain things, it will call AI, and then replace what you've typed with something else. Watch. So he's now choosing his llama font.
It starts with an O, right? So
Okay, I wasn't hallucinating when you said llamas were involved because I'm still trying to get my
Large language model. This is
Okay.
Meta's open
Meta's
font.
open source.
Yeah, it's not open source exactly, but it's open,
All right.
so you can use it.
So we can start using this one. We can say once upon a time.
So he's writing once upon a time. Actually, I'm going to skip a little bit ahead in this because
No, of course not. This is llamas and these books by the end of the day.
So it just changed it on him as he typed.
yeah.
So mess up the magic word, and everything will go back to the way it was just a moment ago. So that's great.
Wait,
You see that
I'm
he had
confused.
abracadabra.
So if you type specific words, it changes the
Yes.
font as you're typing it?
No, it doesn't change the
changes the
font.
word.
It writes more.
Changes the word.
So watch.
Oh.
He's writing once upon a time. Here, let's go back here. Once upon a time, ... You could put we need to have his explanation.
So the idea here is that we don't have to. This is an intelligent font read. So all you need to do is you need to yell at the computer. One
typing.
downside of artificial
bunch of
intelligence
exclamation
is it
marks.
becomes sentient very quickly, and the only way to control it is to yell at it. So that's what we do. We say once upon a time. We give it a lot of buffering space, so we put in a lot of exclamation mark. And the reason we do this is so that it doesn't crash like it did just a moment ago. And then sooner or
He's
later,
pretty geeky.
the computer will start.
It's going to
There we go.
replace
It
those
will
exclamation
start,
marks with actual
running
AI.
the WASM
writing.
the WebAssembly through the little virtual machine that it comes with, Harv Plus. And in our particular case, what the WASM does is that whenever we put in another exclamation mark, it will generate text based on what we wrote before.
So now it's the
it will
font is
complete
writing.
Our
Yes.
little story here.
Every time he types an
So,
exclamation mark.
This is a little unclear again.
I'm watching Paris's face in the Zoom trying to calculate this.
Sorry, I
What?
didn't get it until he just got to the end part there.
I know he's extremely you can read more about it at fuglid.github.io. FUG.
So-
I did find
Leo-
it very charming the way he said idea. Idea?
Yeah.
Oh, I gave him accommodation because I don't think it sounded like he had an accent
I think
that
he's
English
Swedish.
was
He does have an
his
accent,
first,
yeah.
but
Yeah, no, he's got an accent and it's really cute.
So Leo, there's a professor I admire greatly who was my reviewer on Gutenberg Parentheses,
Matthew
Kirschenbaum
Kirschenbaum.
at University of Maryland, and he wrote a great essay in the Atlantic called "The Textpocalypse" about how AI is going to lead all text to become gray goo. And I sent, because I know that he's really into printing and book history and this stuff, so I sent him this a week ago. And it so happens he was giving a presentation at the Sharp Book History Conference today, and he changed his entire presentation to write about just this and how fascinating
about
it is.
llama.ttf? Wow.
Yes.
Oh,
He says, what if downloading an ebook meant not just downloading a text to read, but downloading an entire content farm? The mere act of turning the pages, spawning shadow versions of the text, individualized and customized to targeted preferences, populating platforms the original reader will never see. Now, Grey Goo sounds pretty negative, but this sounds kind of cool. Is he bullish on AI or not?
He's too smart to be bullish or not. He's a professor.
He's
an actual academic.
Okay.
he's gonna say things like a font of type, as Whitman understood, is pure potentiality. That's Matthew.
Yeah, that seems right.
Yeah, right. But he's fascinated by the implications. Matthew's the guy who wrote a book that I think you've read and love, which is The History of Word Processing.
Yes.
Track Changes.
Track Changes, yes.
Ooh.
A brilliant, wonderful, delightful book. And then Matthew is fascinated by the archives of a writer's process and what goes into making text and how that it now disappears online. But what is the meaning of text in society? He's an English professor. But he does it from a technology standpoint. So he was fascinated by this. And
well, speaking of word processing and track changes, one of the subjects of that, of course, was WordPerfect. And a name that people who have been around as long as I have will recognize. One of the creators of WordPerfect, Bruce Bastian, passed away this week at the age of 76. He was an alumnus of Brigham Young, pioneered WordPerfect. Later, would become an advocate for the LGBTQ plus community. As people know, WordPerfect was headquartered in Utah. Passed away surrounded by his 4 sons, his husband, friends, and other family members. So Bruce Bastian, who really was very important in the early days of word processing, I thought
and an LGBTQ,
as it turns out, which is great.
Were you a WordPress or WordPerfect or WordStar?
So I used WordStar in the early days. In fact, because WordStar came out of Northern California, it knew some of the people involved in that. And I still, in my fingers, have Control KS and all of that. All of the WordStar commands, for some reason, they're just still in there. But then when WordPerfect came out on the Mac, oddly enough, I hated WordPerfect on a PC, but they actually made the best word processor on the Mac for a brief shining moment. And I became a strong advocate of WordPerfect on the Mac, but it didn't last.
WordPerfect held on longer than I think longer in the legal space than I think in some other spaces.
That's true,
I don't think it's still really hanging on there. There's a couple of holdouts, like some old school lawyers who are like, I can be more efficient typing this way.
You know why? Because of WordPerfect's keystrokes were based on the Wang word processor, which was very popular in law offices. And so a lot of legal secretaries and paralegals already had been using the Wang to write pleadings when WordPerfect came out. I remember going to law offices, and because WordPerfect also had macros, they had really automated a lot of their operations in WordPerfect. WordPerfect's still around at wordperfect.com. Looks kind of down market. I'm not sure I'd recommend it. They were eaten alive, as were most of the other word processors, by Microsoft Office.
People still, I was very loyal to WordStar for a long time.
Yeah.
It's habit. You learn the keyboard. Because don't forget, my original Osborne had no cursor keys, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Did it not?
So you needed Control K and left, right, and all of that stuff. Yeah.
It was all control keys.
I remember that. Yeah.
I'm purchasing a copy of Track Changes.
Oh, you should read it. You'll love it.
It's really good.
Yeah.
It's really, really good.
And it talks about all the battles.
We should have Matthew on at some point.
Deal. Let's do it. Let's absolutely do it. WordStar was published by MicroPro, I think out of Sausalito, out of your neck of the woods.
Sausalito tends to birth a bunch of interesting businesses who then outgrow the office space.
Yeah, that's a
good problem to have.
Seymour Rubenstein, who was well known in this area, was an early employee at IMSI, and he founded MicroPro in September 1978. Hired a programmer who wrote WordMaster, and then he had learned about IBM, Xerox, and Wang's standalone word processors, added features to WordMaster, support for CP/M, and renamed it WordStar. Started selling it in June 1979 for, get this, $495. And that didn't include the manual. It was additional $40 for the manual.
Well, and here's the thing
on
my yeah, exactly. On my Osborne, I had 2 5-inch disk drives.
It came with WordStar.
One was the data drive. The other one you had to install CP/M in the machine. You had to run CP/M, take it out, put in a WordStar disk to get the commands available then. And then for certain things, you'd have to put in a different WordStar disk because it was not on that disk. It was amazing to do this. And we did it. I wrote a book on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Track changes. Read the book if you want to learn the history of all of this. Speaking of Microsoft's man in charge of AI, he's actually a CEO of AI, Mustafa Suleyman, says, all that stuff on the internet, that's fair use. That's freeware. And it's okay for AI to snarf it all up.
He gets to Jeff's point about the backlash because there's some grains of truth in what he's saying, but he's saying it packaged up with such arrogance.
This is what you were talking about with right to read, though, really.
Yeah, I mean, there's a point where he has a point to a degree, but he's saying something beyond that point and saying it with a tremendous amount of arrogance where people are if that's how it works, I don't share those values.
It's almost designed to piss people off.
Yeah, I really don't think that's advisable. His legal position has not necessarily been ascertained by any courts. He should be kind of right, or at least for the points that I've been arguing, but we need a court to actually say so. He doesn't have enough in his hand that he can afford to be this arrogant, and don't poke the bear.
He definitely poked the bear. He was speaking at the Aspen Ideas Festival, and he said, quote, this is Suleiman's quote, "With respect to content that is already on the open web, the social contract of that content since the 90s has been that it is fair use. Anyone can copy it, recreate with it, reproduce with it. That has been freeware, if you like." That's been the understanding. I don't know if that's the understanding. If I take the copy that The Verge publishes of an article and republish it over my name on my site, that's not considered okay.
What is Business Insider? What is Business Insider? It does that all the time, right? What do we so we read somebody else's article,
copy and publish it. They do.
Well, neither does the AI.
Yeah, I mean, fair use
reads it and learns from it.
Fair use can cover copying and publishing. I mean, we've talked about Google Books. We can talk about the Internet Archive. There are contexts where copying and republishing can still be fair use, but the way he's approaching it is we can copy everything and republish it, and that any additional context is irrelevant is not actually a correct statement of the law. I think he can read it, he can scan it. I think he can train up his AI, and I think that is probably something that the law does and should protect. But it's almost like he got a briefing from his lawyer, misunderstood it, and is now parroting it back.
Yes, that's exactly what
Which doesn't bode well. If his own intelligence is garbling everything, what is his artificial intelligence going to do?
He goes on to say there's a separate category where a website or a publisher, a news organization, has explicitly said, do not scrape or crawl me for any other reason than indexing me so that people can find the content. That's a gray area. And I think that's going to work its way through the courts. He's not even acknowledging that robots.txt.
And if I'm in-house counsel for Microsoft, I might be like, oh crap, just shut up, dude, because he's going to get this is all going to be produced in the litigation, and it ain't going to look good. No. I mean, even
the president of Microsoft used to be the company's counsel, so his boss,
Brad Smith.
Yeah. This is
Brad Smith.
I mean. I make this point sometimes when I do CLEs for other lawyers that there's a lot that the law does let you do and probably should let you do, but you got to kind of care about how people are going to react to it, because otherwise the law gives you this freedom now, but if you make people unhappy and they have no recourse, they're going to go to their government and ask for a law that's going to give them the recourse, and that's not going to be good.
If I say, robots.txt is a norm, there's no legal basis for robots.txt and following it. If I say I got a company here, I'm not going to follow robots.txt. It's out there for free. I'm going to read it. I'm going to learn from it. I'm not going to quote it. So you can't accuse me of. But even if I did, try to argue what fair use is. Right? There's no law.
Right.
It would be difficult to say that flouting robots.txt. Who cares if I don't choose to follow it? I don't follow it.
Gratuitously making people unhappy is not a good business strategy. And it's not a good legal strategy either, because even if statutes and the Constitution might back you up, it's going to be really messy and really expensive to even get to that point. And people will start
that's why the
changing
lawyer at
statutes on
Microsoft is holding his head. Yes,
Yeah,
that's why Brad is holding his head.
The folks at Hugging Face, who do their own AIs and use a lot of AI models, have a AI leaderboard, which they test. They say they use a lot of energy and a lot of power to test a variety of AI models. We burned 300 H100s. That's the very expensive, one of the very expensive NVIDIA GPUs to rerun new evaluations. They said we had to make our leaderboard steep again, so they have even more challenging tests to see which LLM is smart. And so they have, or smartest, they now have the new LLM Leaderboard 2. They give them a massive multitask language understanding test, a Google Proof Q&A benchmark. They have a multi-step soft reasoning, and on and on and on. And drum roll, please, because the results are in. And here, according to Hugging Face, is the grading, new leaderboard for the ranking of all the different AIs. And the number one AI is out of China, Qwen and Qwen 2, beating Microsoft, Meta, Google. In fact, Qwen...
What are they being measured against?
Yeah, how are they
like
determining it?
Size matters, macho
No.
stuff?
They actually have it do work. I just talked a little bit about the various tasks they give it. So they have 6 benchmarks. MMLU Pro is a refined version. Models with 10 choices, requires reasoning on more questions, etc. They ask them to do stuff, reason stuff. The Google Proof Q&A benchmark, extremely hard knowledge data set, questions designed by domain experts in their fields, PhD levels in biology, physics, chemistry, etc., designed to be hard to answer by laypersons, but relatively easy for experts. They do multi-step soft reasoning. Hugging Face writes, is a very fun new data set made of algorithmically generated complex problems of about 1,000 words in length. The problems are either murder mysteries, object placement questions, or team allocation optimizations. They have to combine reasoning and very long-range context parsing. Few models score better than random performance on that one. There's a math test. Do you want to try some of these?
Sure, I bet you could do it.
I refuse to do math live on air.
I was told
that's part
there
of my
would be
contract.
no math.
You'll never be president then.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting that it's the Chinese models that do very, very well in this. The front runner of the new leaderboard is Alibaba's LLM, which takes 1st, 3rd, and 10th place. Also showing up Llama, Meta's LLM, and a handful of smaller open source projects that managed to outperform the pack. ChatGPT doesn't show up in the top 10. Oh, wait a minute. That's because... Oh, sorry. That's not because they were not smart. They weren't tested. Hugging Face's leaderboard does not test closed source models to ensure reproducibility of results. So we don't know how ChatGPT would do on this or any of the other closed models. But Qwen does well. I only bring that up because we've talked kind of theoretically about, well, imagine what the Chinese are doing. Well, now we know, and they're absolutely competing. Going along,
and OpenAI has left China, so it only kind of one view is that opens up more development in China.
Right. We mentioned Suleiman's take that, hey, it's on the web, it's free for anybody's use. Apparently, Perplexity AI believes this to the nines.
Absolutely.
They are trying to create a Google search competitor. I use it. It's quite good.
Very good.
It's not trying to create a search engine. It wants to create an answer engine. But according to The Verge, they're doing it by basically sucking the brains out of legitimate sources. The Verge writes, let me get the author's name since I'm sucking her brains out. Elizabeth Lopato says, that means Perplexity is basically a rent-seeking middleman on high-quality sources. Perplexity dodges publications' paywalls. Forbes found this out in order to provide a summary of an investigation the publication did of Eric Schmidt's drone company. They just travel the web.
So if you look at, but and this is so I wrote a post about this on Medium with a really ugly pyramid on it about the what I call the new pyramid of discoverability and how we get found through AI. If you go to the top story on Perplexity Discover right now, it's Phil Schiller joining OpenAI's board. It sources this and quotes and links to the sources. The first one is The Verge, then Bloomberg, then Mac Rumors, then 9to5Mac, who are all writing the same story. We are all rewriting each other all the time, unless you're a reporter like Paris, who uniquely finds foreskin news for our show. That's reporting.
Completely
That's
fresh.
reporting.
Well, how do you feel about it, Paris? If Perplexity extracts the content of your hard work and publishes it in such a way that they don't have to go to the information to read it. Many of them can't because it's $400 a year to read the information.
Perplexity cited though, so there is a chance with that AI that it actually will go to your work.
Perplexity's citations are like they're like a tiny number in the corner. It is barely even a link out, I would argue. And I do think that the journalists' complaints about Perplexity chewing up and spitting out their work without clearly citing it, at least when I think that those criticisms hold value. I think that at least when, Jeff, I think you've compared this to like a Business Insider aggregation model, at least when actual people are aggregating stories, they write out like according to the information and add a link.
So does Perplexity. They do too.
So let me go to the Discover feed here. This is the story you were talking about. Apple observe on OpenAI's board.
Press release.
According to Bloomberg's recent report by Mark
report.
Gurman. By the way, Gurman, this is a rumor. This is not confirmed. So Gurman is using his sources. So this really does deserve a lot of credit goes to Mark Gurman, even though, as you point out, The Verge and everybody else just
did the same thing.
republished
The Verge did to Bloomberg what they're accusing Perplexity of doing.
Saying much the same thing. They do have a link to Bloomberg.
It's interesting, though. It seems like, because I had looked into this when a couple of weeks ago, I think we talked also on the show, there was a big brouhaha with Forbes accusing Perplexity of stealing their exclusive information and posting it without any citation, any notable citation on it. And at the time, I think even on the show, we went through and the citations were not like according to publication. It was a tiny like subscript one that if you moused over it would take you to the website. I think that maybe because they've been called out in it, they're doing it in a bit more traditional way, which is better.
If you open it up, Leo, on your phone, open up that story on Perplexity, right?
Do I have to do it on my phone or can I do it on the computer?
I think you can do it on the computer.
Yeah.
Then it has a box for Bloomberg and a box for The Verge. And then if you go down to the first paragraph that I talk about it, then it says 4 sources. And you click on that and it has headline and first 2 lines from stories with links to them.
Right.
It links more generously than Business Insider ever did.
Yeah. It also quotes OpenAI's own press release. So apparently it is no longer a rumor. Let me just see if that's in the press release. No, it's not. That's pretty interesting. So it quotes a press release that doesn't, in fact, mention this. The press release, oh, no wonder. The press release is from March.
Did we play with Perplexity the last time I was on Twig? And
possibly.
We tested with Huey Lewis searching, and it rendered something that I kind of thought.
Yeah, that was the search part. This is more like Google News. This is different product.
Well, yeah, but we can. Yeah, the search is how probably most people see it. I don't know about you, but I don't click discover links. Right? I mean, when you go to perplexity.ai, you get the home page where you can type in that query, you know, how old is Huey or whatever. There is a link to discover, but
I actually check the Discover every day. They do a good. It's a good slick packaging of a half dozen stories with links to the sources.
Oh, look at this! China's brain-computer interface plans.
See?
Yeah.
What could go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong?
Go wrong.
Yeah. It reminds me of the old campaign. Was it Dumb Ways to Die? Do you remember that, Paris?
Yeah, do I remember Dumb Ways to Die, an earworm.
I think about that sometimes when I make choices about what I'm going to do or, you know, where I'm going to go. Is if, like, I met my end here, how lame would the obituary be?
Well, I don't know if I've talked about this in the show, but me and my friends have a game we play sometimes whenever we're drinking, which is what would be the silliest vehicle to be hit and killed by. And this was started by someone we know, who's fine, by the way, she got hit by a dump truck, and we're like, oh, that's a pretty funny thing to get hit by.
I
But I mean,
can
if you
beat
had to
that.
be like
Wienermobile.
Paris died,
Wienermobile
is the first thing that came to mind.
Wienermobile is top of
No,
there.
no,
Mitzvah truck
mine.
is also up there.
What's a mitzvah?
Mine,
That
It's
must be a New
a-
York thing.
It's
New
a
York
like
Post truck.
And
a New York Post truck.
That
Because then they
sad
won't
for
even cover
you.
the story.
Yeah. They could
That
say
would be
something
quite.
like,
I was thinking a Red Bull, one of those Red Bull cars.
oh, yeah. The Zugflog.
They're small. They wouldn't hurt too much.
Am I the only one of us who has been hit by a vehicle?
Oh, have you?
Yeah,
what
I've
kind
been
of
hit by a
vehicle?
It wasn't silly. It was. I think. It
No,
was
it's definitely not.
I think it
Christina
was
Warren was hit by a bus in Seattle after she moved there from years of never being hit in Manhattan. What did you get hit by?
I think it was a burgundy sedan, and I
don't
was
remember much. I think.
I was on my way to school. I mean, this was a long time ago, and it was coasting down the hill. It was early morning. It was a dark car. I didn't see it. I didn't hear it, and I had proceeded into the intersection on my bike, and that was a mistake.
Oh,
Oh, well, here is a mitzvah tank conquering New York City. This is what you're talking about getting hit by?
yes, a
Yeah.
mitzvah tank is a vehicle used by the Orthodox Jewish community to kind of
is
as
a parade.
outreach to convert
to
people.
bring Jews back into the fold. And because some say I look Jewish.
So do you get the
every
question
time-
where they ask,
Oh, yes.
"Are you Jewish?"
Oh, absolutely, every time.
And if you say yes, what do?
They try to get you into the
They're
mitzvah
like,
tank.
"Are you close to God?" Like,
Yeah.
and they try to. So I think the funniest vehicle to be hit by is a tandem bicycle. Ideally, a 3-person tandem bicycle, because the first person isn't in control of it, and they're like, "Oh," but then the second person is like, "Ah," and they can't control it. And by the time it comes to the third person, they're just resigned.
I haven't seen
But-
3-person tandem bicycles.
Certainly not in Manhattan.
No,
No.
they definitely are not a common thing.
That's something you see on,
In a
Martha's
Richard Scarry
Vineyard,
book.
perhaps.
My favorite
Yeah.
thing is to go down to Venice Beach and rent one of those Venice Beach Surrey bicycles. You can ride around. A family of 4 can ride around.
Speaking of Richard Scarry, the Apple car, that could be a good
There
one.
you go.
Yeah, okay.
There you go.
Yeah.
Were we speaking of Richard Scarry?
Yes, I think that he might have invented a 3-person tandem.
Pope Mobile might be funny too.
The Pope Mobile.
Pope
There you go.
Mobile.
Which looks a lot like the Apple car in Richard Scarry.
It does.
book.
Yeah.
Infringement.
There are a lot of-
The Pope Mobile was infringing Richard Scarry.
It's a fun little game.
It is a fun game. You've got me thinking.
I mean, it's morbid. But you
Neil
know,
was
there are a
frozen
lot
in
of
real
fun
life.
little vehicles
It was
out there.
frozen you froze me solid with that. I couldn't move.
Here's just trapped in
Here's some
thought.
depressing news behind a paywall, but I do pay for the Financial Times, so I can read it. Oh, except wait a minute.
You can
I'm
read
not-
those salmon-colored
It's another story
broadsheets.
that's been everywhere. Everybody's rewritten the story, so
Oh,
you don't
really?
have to pay for
Jeff,
it.
Oh.
stop hating news.
Yeah, what do you have against news? You don't like news? Is that it?
You lose one California Senate thing and you're on a rampage.
The story actually comes from Google's own admissions.
Right.
They publish every year an environmental report. On their environmental report, which came out yesterday, they said greenhouse gas emissions have surged 48%, almost by half in the last 5 years. Why? Due to the expansion of data centers for artificial intelligence systems. A 48% increase from its 2019 baseline, 13% since last year. This highlights the challenge of reducing emissions and may even make it difficult to reach our 2030 commitment to net zero.
So stop making such damn big models. Concentrate more. I think there was other stuff in here. I think
She also says
this
these-
notion of scale is not gonna work.
Chief Sustainability Officer Kate Brandt, who must have a terrible job these days, says we do still expect our emissions to continue to rise before dropping towards our goal. Yeah, we're going to go down, but not now. This is that is bad
We'll
as
all
you
go
get.
down together.
Quite grim.
Yeah, we'll go down when you all go down.
Bet you they're going to make the revenue targets though.
Yeah, oh yeah. The revenue targets
then
are also
some.
continuing to rise. with no plans.
So Arvind
capitalism is neutral.
Narayanan.
The beatings will continue until morale improves.
Yeah. Arvind Narayanan and Sayesh Kapoor said this week that they talked about the AI scaling myths. And Bill Gates said, maybe we got 2 more leaps here from scale, but scale's not going to be what is going to get us farther. I think we're going to see a diminishment of these huge models and the huge efforts. We'll see. I don't know enough to know but I
Bill
think
Gates, also quoted in the Financial Times, says, let's not go overboard on worries about AI energy use.
Let's not bicker and argue about
But you
who
know why he
killed
says
who.
that? He says because it's going to help us in a boon in green. He didn't say
cream
that.
donuts?
Green and chocolate cream. I could use one right now. He says he's been a prolific investor in companies developing sustainable energy and carbon reduction technologies. He says AI is going to pay a green premium because the tech companies are the people willing to pay the premium and to help bootstrap green energy capacity. So don't worry about all of that. It's going to and maybe he's right, you know?
He may be right. He also probably deserves to be mocked because I think he may turn out to be right, but it doesn't feel like his positions are predicated on enough of an understanding. It's a little bit wing and a prayer.
It's also not what they're trying to do right now. That's not what they're doing.
It's kind of like saying...
That's not what they're trying to do.
Oh.
It might be like
all that sewage
They're going
on
after
the
the big
beach,
bucks stuff.
That's just going to encourage more people to come up with sewage treatment facilities. So don't worry about all the sewage on the beach.
Well, I think his point is a little bit different, but it might need more of a cudgel. He's basically saying that, okay, we need to pay for, we have the cash, we need the alternatives, so we are more likely to unite the cash with the alternatives, which the alternatives need. He's probably not wrong, but only if those companies are sort of forced to apply their cash to the alternatives, either because it will save them a lot of money or because they're going to have to because some regulation's going to require it. Or the market requires it.
Let's just take a look at some of the things that the world is burning all that energy for to create AI. Here's an example of AI gymnastics, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy.
Trigger warning, this is freaky.
Oh, boy.
This is really freaky.
Oh, no. Oh, no. She's just gone.
Yep. 4 legs. You can do amazing things if you have 4 legs and nothing else.
Guys, I haven't been able to get a straw in Brooklyn in years, and this is what it's all going for?
You're saving the whales while we're generating bizarre AI gymnastics videos.
Oh, my God.
Isn't that freaky?
She's all legs.
Yeah.
And still not as good as Simone Biles.
Well, apparently, this is, in a way, the ultimate Turing test for AI. At least that's what Cheshire Cat says.
How many? I didn't see closely how many fingers did that monstrosity have.
AI doesn't actually understand the human body and its motion. So it's just taking the
doesn't seem to understand basic
data.
physics.
No, I think that's more a
it
consequence
doesn't.
of the broadcasting of gymnastics. It's like super fast sport. So how is any AI going to parse that?
Right. It's just, I mean,
Well,
that's
AI has no sense of, it has no reality.
That's why it can't parse that. Like, how is it going to parse something that's that fast?
Because it actually should have been able to read something about the physics of gymnastics and look at the human body and look at the bar and being able to do some calculations on when the body is in motion, predict where it's going to end up next.
Oh, it's
But
not
it doesn't
doing
know.
that.
But it doesn't have the idea of a body or a bar.
Yeah, it's not doing any of that. It's just,
Well, then it's not very intelligent, then, is it?
No,
Right, it's not.
Yeah, okay,
That's why
fine.
AGI is BS.
Okay.
Because it doesn't have a reality.
It's just
we
averaging.
test reality constantly from being babies. We're constantly testing things. It can't.
Yeah.
You're not wrong. Rodney Brooks, who is a robotics pioneer from MIT, says people are vastly overestimating generative AI.
Hello. It's time for Leo to get another walk on the beach. He's losing his program.
I'm losing.
Yeah.
He is. Now, I
A
have
big
to say,
hook comes off stage left and pulls you back into the...
he actually keeps a scorecard on his website, which is rodneybrooks.com, of his AI and robotics predictions. So this guy puts his money where his mouth is. I think it's pretty good. He's whether he's correct or not, Here's in 2017, he said the hubris about the oncoming of self-driving cars was at a similar level of hubris as we were last year about ChatGPT being a step towards AGI. He says he was pretty close in most of his predictions, actually. Did a pretty good job. So, that's good. He's bringing the receipts.
Yeah, honesty.
You put a lot of stuff in this AI segment here. AI.
He's got a whole other
myths.
Do you just copy it from the AI podcast, Jeff?
I actually do it here first and copy it over there. But yeah, I figure might as well.
What? You know what?
I'm glad that we're first in your heart.
Jeff is the perplexity AI of podcasting, is what he is. Yes.
I'm the scissors editor.
Tech industry wants to lock up nuclear power for AI, according to the Wall Street Journal. They want to buy nuclear power directly from the plants. Just suck it right up. That's what Bill Gates was talking about. There you go. That's going to make it all better. OpenAI has built an AI to critique AI. It's called Critic GPT, and it's intended to help identify hallucinations.
We need to stop burning the planet for this stuff.
This is what we're burning the planet for, kids.
Give me back my straws if we're going to do these. My straws shouldn't be dissolving in my coffee on a day-to-day basis.
Just
or I have to
don't
deal
use
with
straws.
those stupid... Okay, they give me those... Have you tried to have an iced coffee with
the
one of
paper
those
straws.
lids that is just
No, I hate those.
It's like a sippy cup lid?
Yeah.
I'm an adult. Give me a straw.
Have you tried the metal straws?
Okay, I have, but one, you've got to clean those regularly. And two, I've seen stories of people falling with them and they go through your brain and then you die.
Jesus.
What?
Oh, Jesus.
They should.
No, that's not
Were
true.
they hit by a mitzvah tank first?
No, it's just metal versus human flesh.
No, so
Metal
most of them
wins.
now are like I have a couple that I use at home on like for home straw use. I don't use them traveling around, and they have rubber tips now, and some of them have extra rubber because I think they recognize that metal and skull are not really a good
That'll
plan.
cushion
Well,
the
I just
blow.
put. She's right. She's right. I put it in the.
No,
in the
don't look
Discord.
it up. It's gonna. You put it in the Discord. Great. Yeah, it's awful. It
Are
stresses
metal
me out.
straws safe? Why, some experts say no. From Sprudge Coffee. Oh, well, that's a source.
Sprudge.com.
I'm telling you, he's the perplexity AI of podcasting. Here's Jeff's article in Tech Dirt. Nice job, Jeff. How to save the news. I guess you must have an in with Kathy here. There's still hope that California's...
No, Mazdik's going up. It's funny. Mazdik says he's on vacation all week. He still publishes 100 pieces.
It's amazing.
But this was 101 that he didn't have time for. So he's like, Henry, can I use yours? I said, sure, I'm honored.
He also linked to the footage, which is now on YouTube, of your testimony before
Well, last
the California
week,
Assembly.
Micah and Paris were nice enough to play my testimony.
Oh, good. Then I don't
Unlike the
have to.
time that I
Thank
was in the
God.
Senate
Okay.
when you didn't.
I don't have to. They've done
Yeah.
it already. without
Many
me.
vacations were ruined by certain Supreme Court decisions on Monday. That vacations
Oh,
have
I
been
bet.
planned,
Poor
and
Mike. Oy.
yeah.
Ay. Okay, there's so many damn stories in here, Jeff. Just pick some, okay?
Well,
Tim Wu is out of
you did a
control.
Good job.
How is Tim Wu out of control?
So Tim Wu wrote a New York Times op-ed saying that the First Amendment is out of control. He's been doing this since 2017 when he asked whether the First Amendment is obsolete. He hates the tech companies so much, he's willing to throw out our rights to enable regulating them.
Tim, who is a
And
law
Mike
professor at
takes him
Columbia,
down.
wrote the what is the name of that book that he wrote? I don't remember. Anyway, the activation switch or whatever.
Yeah. So speaking of Mike Masnick, he's written a post that I think is called "Tim Wu is out of control."
That's the one I'm
That's
quoting.
it.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
that's what we got.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And he also served in the Biden White House, did he not? I believe
he
he
did.
did.
Yep,
Yeah.
he did. Yep.
I didn't realize he'd become such a rabid anti-tech guy.
He's also been teaming up, I think, with Zephyr Teachout, and they've been pushing for some ideas that are just, these are not good ideas. They're not sustainable, and carried to their logical conclusion
As
will hurt
an example,
people.
from February, Texas is right. The tech giants need to be regulated. Darn it.
Yeah, I don't think taking the side of a very politicized position designed to really put its thumb on the the scales of what expression can be out there is the best call.
Yeah. Twitter,
What else here?
alternative Mastodon, is now adding a byline feature, which I think is very nice. The bylines go beyond the typical @username references.
It'll make it all the easier for Perplexity to steal the stuff.
No, I think it's good. Anything that makes Mastodon
it is
more
good.
popular to journalists. You said you went to Threads because that's where the journalists are. Let's get them off of Threads, shall we? And
I agree.
Let's get them off Twitter. I'd rather have them go
and
to
get them
Threads.
off Twitter as well. Although we're
this is
on Twitter
interesting.
right now, by the way. Did you know that?
I know.
Is that okay with you?
You know, I guess yes, but
Hey,
I actually
Twitter.
did feel kind of squicky about it.
Yeah, me too. But then I went to x.com and I noticed, hey, look, we're number 1 on the list of live streams
Hey,
right now.
there's 922 people watching. That's fun.
So
Hello, all of you. We love you. Give to the club. Join the damn club.
It's
huh?
hard.
Don't
it's
just
hard
watch
not,
it here.
You know, I haven't been on Twitter since Elon bought it. And then I found out we could stream on Twitter. And because there are such a dearth of live streams on Twitter, we would probably be on the top. And it would drive a whole lot of content and a whole bunch of new people discovering us. And like Super Trucker. Hello, Super Trucker Jay. And so I'm really thrilled. What the hell? I don't care. I got no. I got no scruples.
You administer Mastodon, though, right?
Huh?
You administer a Mastodon instance,
I
right?
do.
So now that people know about it, they know they have some options.
Yes, twit.social. Everybody, get on over there. That's what my. That's also what my Twitter.
All the discourse and none of the baggage.
Yeah, my Twitter. Well, no, I wish it were all the discourse. That's the problem. You're right. None of the baggage, but also very
Some
little
of the discourse and none of the baggage.
And
I meant discourse in sort of a lowercase d sense, not a uppercase d.
I'm very proud of twit.social. It's become a very lovely, quiet, but lovely place.
That's good.
To
That's
hang
what
out.
makes it good.
It's fairly. It's
Some of
scale.
the discourse, none of the retweets.
Yeah, no
none of the
retweeting, not
baggage.
allowed. Mm-mm.
Or I guess quote tweeting.
Yeah, and I think there's people.
I do think that's a mistake, though.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the reasons I think I ended up preferring Blue Sky to Mastodon, even though conceptually I kind of like Mastodon more, because I realized that not being able to quote tweet really was affecting my ability to interact with what I was reading. And I know they did that on purpose because a lot of the interactions were so negative, but it prevented positive or neutral ones too. And it was a little less fun. I was getting frustrated.
Yeah.
One weird story here.
Yes.
One.
Amazon bricked its Astro business robots less than a year after launch.
Oh,
Are
Astro's
those
dead.
the dogs?
No, yeah, we hardly knew ye. No, it was the robot that had a periscope neck. It would wander around on your floor, and then it had a little camera that would go up on a periscope and look around. I'm sad, so they
So
killed
was it
it.
too
huh?
good for the brand? Yeah, they're off a full refund, $23.49.99 plus a $300 credit, but it's bricked. Just, sorry, nope.
What a
not
shame.
working.
They
That's
should've-
really sad.
They should have just covered it with human skin.
They should have just
we'd
covered
like
it
it.
with human skin.
If I had any foreskin, never mind. Oh, so it's not merely that they're not going to sell it anymore. If you bought
No,
one,
it's bricked.
They're not going to work. They're giving you a refund, asking you to send it back so they can recycle
Wow.
it. That's how dead it is.
Wow. By the way, this story first from GeekWire. So thank you, GeekWire.
And then, as Paris has her tunnels, I think we have a new series for Paris here, which is This Week in Human Cells.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Line number 107.
We're not supposed to talk about line numbers, Jeff. We can't let them behind the curtain.
This is from Neoscope. No, Futurism. Futurism.com. And I've been quoting them a lot lately. In fact, I got a nice note from their editor-in-chief, so we should get maybe get
Hey,
them
let's
on.
have John on here.
Do you know
sometime.
them?
John Christian? I think he's either their executive editor or
It must
editor-in-chief.
be- maybe
He
that's
and
who-
I worked together at the Outline.
All right.
Oh, cool.
All right. There we go.
You know
A team
everybody.
of Chinese researchers has stuck a tiny organoid made from human stem cells into the body of a tiny robot, resulting in a Frankensteinian creation that can learn how to complete certain tasks. What tasks are those, you might ask? Well, good news. The South China Morning Post reports by hooking the brain tissue to a neural interface, it allows it to pass on instructions to the humanoid robot body. This is actually the story we were talking about earlier, where the Chinese were getting human-computer interfaces.
I think that's different, isn't it?
Is it?
I
This
think
is the
that's-
world's first
that's-
open-source
that's Elon.
brain-on-a-chip, intelligent, complex information interaction system. The pink blobs, oh, we're back to that again. What is it with robotics researchers, after all? The pink blobs of what appear to be brain matter on the pictures are simply mock-ups, so don't be afraid.
If that's
made
the
up that.
mock-up, what's
It's got
the
a
real
brain
thing?
in a petri dish, and it's plugged into it.
That's Krang from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh, it's disgusting.
True,
I'm
that
pretty
is
sure I
correct.
saw an image like that mocked on Mystery Science Theater 3000 in one of their movies.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for
That was
sharing
the inside
that
of a
with us.
dumpling.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You know, every culture has a dumpling.
But they don't put it on a robot.
You know
That's
that
true.
while we have 932 people watching us on Twitter or X, let me just check real quickly. But the last time I checked,
It's probably 2 right
there
now.
were 2 people watching us. You're right, on Facebook. So,
Wow. Hello,
Yeah.
Facebook.
Wow.
hello,
Hey,
Facebook.
one of my favorite dumb facts is that Redbox was bought and is owned by Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Yes.
Which I think is just a pairing that breaks my brain every time I think
Is
about it.
it the same as
But-
the book Chicken Soup for the Soul?
Yes. Chicken
Yes.
Soup for the Soul. The company owns Redbox and bought them during like
What's-
a meme stock
And apparently
bump
is
for
having
Redbox.
severe issues
And
with
now-
its
They
current
went
ownership.
out. They're
Yeah.
dead.
Yeah.
They have become a $1 billion debt fiasco, according to Sherwood News' analysis of their various financials. It's in part because Redbox owes like millions of dollars of unpaid licensing fees. Universal Studios sued Redbox earlier this year, saying it hadn't made a payment for any of the content it licenses since summer 2022. So, hard time to be a purveyor of, I guess, DVDs and Christian tearjerker novels.
So, I read Chicken Soup for the Soul. I thought it was okay.
Yeah?
That was back in the early 90s. Apparently, they took the money made and invested it into an interesting pastiche, shall we say, of products ranging from education, TV, film, and video to pet food. So, although
Okay.
it kind of makes sense that you would buy Chicken Soup for the Soul grain-free food for your dog, I guess.
I guess at least it's a food.
But
Should you feed your dog chicken soup?
That's like
There's no-
like Rudy Giuliani coffee. Makes no sense.
Yeah, they think that name has some cachet or something.
I guess.
Giuliani is disbarred, though.
Apparently,
That's
they
true.
own Crackle. I didn't know that.
Yes.
They also own the Landmark Studio Group and Popcorn Flicks and Screen Media. And truly, they've just been snapping up dying media properties with all that money.
Now it's killing them.
And Redbox turns out to be the one that's going to put them out of their misery.
Wow, of all those names, that's the only one I'd heard of.
Yeah. So Redbox had a very interesting business. They would put these red boxes outside of convenience stores and bodegas, and you could get, a small selection of DVDs.
CD.
And you rent
DVD,
them in a vending machine and you bring it back. But apparently it wasn't exactly a big money maker.
Hey, on the subject of all the old movies and stuff you guys like to talk about, Chicken Soup currently owns the North American rights to a majority of the Laurel and Hardy films. Most of the Our Gang library, which is a series of
Oh, I
shorts
love Our
produced in the
Gang.
early 1900s. Of course you do.
So interesting. It makes me wonder.
And the
if-
majority of the Hal Roach library.
Oh, these are great. I grew up on this stuff.
Yeah,
But
Chicken
what
Soup
do
for the Soul.
I guess you could. Here they are, the original Little Rascals. That's Spanky, and then they had the token black kid Stymie.
That's Spanky.
That's Spanky. I don't know who this ugly critter is. But you know what's interesting about this? These people, they're all dead now.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you ever? Is that morbid?
All right, well,
but when I watch this stuff, I think, oh yeah, they're all dead. They were kids.
Well,
now what's
you're
scary
clearly being targeted for those thoughts because the promoted video on the right side of that screen is how all the kids in Little Rascals died. That was I don't know if you guys noticed that, but that was the top promoted
Clearly
video on
aimed
that
at
YouTube
me.
screen. Yeah.
Wow.
It knows that that's what you want.
Oh
It's
my
content
God.
about their death.
What's scarier is watching, TV shows from the 70s and even the 80s and realizing that to some extent, same situation.
Oh yeah. Now, so interestingly, because I could play this YouTube video of our gang, but then I would get sued by Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Choose your plaintiff.
And they need the
Because they
money.
need the money.
Gonna go
Leo.
out,
need
go
the
out
money.
big.
They need the money. I wouldn't do it.
Yep.
Nope.
Oh, I know alfalfa.
Actually, is that
All right.
stuff?
Yeah.
Like, what is
Alfalfa,
what is
yeah.
the copyright on that? Because some of that stuff is so old.
It's pre-copyright, but I guess.
Well-
so how could they own? How could they
No,
own it?
I mean that's 1909 copyright, but the question is whether
Yeah, no.
the term.
This is after. This is still in copyright.
Well, but I thought stuff from 1927 has gone out of
well,
copyright.
okay. So public domain did a pop out. So I was curious whether it was pre that year or
Because
not.
this is from 1920. Wouldn't that be public domain? Is there some way that Chicken Soup of the Soul could like re-copyright it?
The
I wouldn't
attempts have been
risk
made.
it.
It's not supposed to succeed, but
Yeah.
actually they bought a library that may be essentially becoming less of an asset over time, which is kind of how it's supposed to work.
Should I play this and see what happens?
No,
I'm not giving
we've
legal
already
advice
been
on that
taken
topic.
down before.
I'm taking it to the Supreme Court.
Plus, Kathy has an early flight.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let's quickly get out of here. Google Keep.
She's
It's
got to
time-
get those donuts quick.
It's time for the change log. Play the thing.
The Google change.
It's going to be a short.
This won't take long.
be a
There's
short
nothing here. I put it in.
110.
Two of them are duplicates. So
I think we
you're
did
done
this
enough.
last week. 110 new languages are coming to Google Translate. That's old. We did that one, didn't we? Including Cantonese
It's
and
dated
Tama-
June 27th.
and Tamazight.
Oh,
No,
You
okay.
weren't here last week.
Okay.
you weren't here. You deserted us.
Many of these languages are from Africa. So that's pretty cool. That's
pretty amazing.
cool.
AI made it possible to do that.
Yeah. I think this is cool because I think Google Keep is a pretty darn good note-taking app. It now lets you have multiple accounts side by side in split screen. So you can have, your wife's shopping list and yours, and you can copy stuff
How old is
over.
that keyboard in that picture? It looks like something I used on an ATEX.
No, those keyboards are in
They're
now.
hip
People
now.
love
They
that
are?
kind
Oh,
of
they're
stuff.
hip.
Yeah.
That's probably an $800
People like
keyboard.
the keyboards that go clicky clack,
Oh, okay.
Yeah. See?
Yeah.
Hey, they're
I
better
mean,
keyboards. They're better
They're
keyboards.
much better. We like these.
There's a lot of buttons on that keyboard.
There's a lot of buttons. That's it. That's the Google
That's it.
changelog.
Play it.
You heard it.
Play it.
You know what's next? After the changelog, the picks of the... No, not that. The picks of the week are coming up next. You're watching This Week in Google with Paris Martineau, Jeff Jarvis, and a wonderful special guest, Kathy Gellis, to explain the Supreme Court.
Hey,
for us.
Kathy.
Let's continue on with Paris's pick of the week.
my pick of the week is the New York City Department of Transportation's Instagram account, which is just delightful. Look at the first pinned video there. It's an interview with an asphalt guy. You've got to turn the sound on.
All right, he's Dot.
Have spin on the vest. Some people call me Spin Mike.
Oh, I love this
Originally
accent.
from Brooklyn. I have a 84.
No,
Ferrari
really?
Ritz. That's that Brooklyn thing, you know what I'm saying? Mechanic/laborer here. We kind of
I love these
just repair
guys.
anything and everything that needs to be repaired in this place.
You
It's
understand?
just a cute little slice of life
Yeah.
about all these guys who work in the New York DOT. It's
Here-
adorable.
here's Frank.
The next one,
He's a blacksmith who
is
makes
a-
street signs.
It's just showing all the different workers in the DOT. You might need to turn the audio off.
Beyonce's
or else
going to
it'll
come
take it
after
down.
me next.
And their star signs. It's great. I'd really recommend it. They show you how they make all of the New York City signs here.
Signs.
I love the signs. The sign shop is my favorite place in the world. This is so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's lovely. I love the New York City various departments' social media. The New York City Ferry has a great account. I've always been a big fan of the New York City Department of Sanitation, which I think is one of my favorite accounts. And yeah, I don't know. It was just very delightful, and I came across it today, so I thought I'd share it with all of you.
In New York City, they don't call them garbage men. They call them sanitation workers.
Yeah.
And that, they're a union group. I think the wait list to even apply to be a sanitation worker is years long. Because it's 6 figures.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. You gave me another reason to go back to Instagram. The New York Department of Transportation, NYC_DOT. I love those accents. I'm sad that regional accents are they're fading away, aren't they? They're not New York.
Well, you helped kill them, and you made the model to be this voice from nowhere.
BS.
Yeah, okay, wait. You want a good example? Scroll down. It's like 4 or 5 down to the right. There's a guy wearing a yellow vest, and it says, POV, you're trying to interview the asphalt plant mechanic.
Okay, let's talk to him here. Let's see.
People know what that means, but it's just recycled material. That's all it is.
He goes to his phone's going off. He picks it up.
What do you want?
No, I don't want lunch. This guy's making pictures of me over here. I'm going to be on like Fox 5 or something.
I just think that's so cute. Good for him.
It's like Tony Soprano. It's
like
Yeah, but it's also the accents of my family. They're not quite this, but it's New Yorkish, and
you have a little New York in there.
I mean, I'm from Bergen County, New Jersey, but I think it's not particularly, but it's not as overt as
we round up to New York.
I round up to New York, but I have relatives.
My family's from Leonia,
Oh, your family?
Yeah.
Okay. My dad is.
Did you have an accent as a kid, Leo?
No, and I grew up in the place where the worst accent in the world, Rhode Island.
Yeah.
But I must have avoided it somehow.
Yeah. My dad's Bronx, so
I love it. I wish I had an accent.
My stepmom is Brooklyn, and I had some cousins visiting me. I'm not quite sure which New York it is, but they were visiting, and it's not just the accent, but it's also what you say. So like they they left.
What do you want? You banana?
Yeah, they left, and I had to call them, and the my cousin's like, so what did we forget? And stuff.
Yeah, right.
It's
forget about it. Yeah.
We
I like my favorite line
the hell
from
out of.
What was the Billy Crystal where he's a psychiatrist and he's treating
Analyze This.
Analyze This. My favorite line from Analyze This is guy's leaving. There's a mafioso guy leaving the psychiatrist. His guard is there. The guard says, "Get me what's a sandwich? Give me a sandwich. What's a diet sandwich?" But he calls it a sandwich. What's a diet sandwich? And the guy says, "Half a sandwich." And I just love that. And apparently, sandwich. There's a whole story about sandwich. Did you know that? It's not a mispronunciation. Oh, now I'm trying to remember. I just recently saw that.
Always razz the hell out of one of our friends who grew up like on Long Island or something. But whenever he has no accent whatsoever, but if he picks up the phone to call a pizza order in, the thickest New York accent you've ever heard comes out. He's got a pizza voice.
Yeah.
My mom was Brooklyn, but not a very strong Brooklyn, and she retired to Boston, and her UPS driver thought she sounded like she was from The Sopranos.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Here's an article. I wanted a sandwich, but I asked for a sandwich instead. She's from Catalan in Spain, but she's also a language and phonetics nerd, and she cannot pronounce sandwich. She can only say sandwich.
But it's interesting, The Sopranos, because now I'm blanking on the name. The guy who played Tony Soprano,
James Gandolfini.
James Gandolfini is actually, he grew up a town or two away from me, where it's not a very profound accent, and he had to do, I think, voice coaching in order to play the character with that accent because it was not native to him.
Yeah. Can I play this? I want to play this. Go ahead. Let's live it up. Let's live it up.
How did you get out?
Well, this is getting blown.
This is get pulled down, huh?
Yeah.
Darn it. Can't do anything around here because of stupid copyright.
Well, yeah, and fair use is supposed to sort of make that kind of thing
but
okay.
fair use is, as you know, a defense, and I don't have the money to defend myself.
And it's also like YouTube; they're like very pro.
They pull everything down. Yeah. Let's do Kathy. She has a good pick of the week this week. It is not a Huey Newton in the news.
Huey Lewis and the news.
Huey Newton and the
no
and the
Huey
Chicago
Lewis
7.
and the
Huey
news.
Luton
It's not
and the Newton.
Guys,
Huey Lewis and the news. We know.
What
it should not be hard.
I'm just giving you a hard time. What's your pick of the week, there, Kathy?
Well, I'd given Benito a picture, but then I realized as we were talking and people talking about we don't want to do math on the show, I was realizing that math came up this week. There was a clip from somebody who I think is an Eric Abrams supporter was bragging about how she got a 5 on the calculus AP exam.
Yeah.
And I'm a little dismissive of this because I also got a 5 on the calculus AP exam. So allow me to brag
Are
on.
you a math nerd?
No, but they actually had a really, really, really good teacher. But one of the things the teacher said is when we were finishing the class at the end of the year, she wanted us to write letters to the incoming class following us to kind of tell them what to expect. And doing things in my own idiom, instead of writing a letter, I wrote a poem.
The calculus advice.
This is not my website. I had it on my own website, but my website is broken. I have not sung it, but I can recite it.
I can actually take it
so
and make a song out of it on Suno while you read it. So you read
I don't
it.
know if I want AI to give me a
and
song.
I'm going to get an AI song.
I don't know if
while you read
AI
it.
Song. I could do my own songs, but this one doesn't have one. But and I wrote it with my friend Amanda. And this is not our website, just because my website is currently unwell, so I couldn't link to that. But it turns out it got released enough into the ether that other people posted it on their site. So when I wanted to point it out, here we are. So, to whom it may concern, if it is calculus that you will learn, take heed of our advice. We hope it will suffice. First, some things you need to know. Well, if you don't, well, we told you so. Know your algebra very well, or your life will be a living hell. Absolute values may look silly, 'tis true, but unless you know them, you won't have a clue. Geometry will come back to haunt you. Know it, or else this class will daunt you. Know about functions in relation to sets, a good thing to know for blondes and brunettes. A silly rhyme, but what else is new? Now here's more you'll need to review. Do not think it asinine, tangent, cotangent, and cosine, and do not dismiss it as incidental when you study a transcendental. And if you don't remember log and lin, oh, what trouble you'll be in. And though derivatives may seem quite grim, if you don't know them, you'll be out on a limb, LIM. Be prepared to understand integrals, calculating area within intervals. Later in the year, you'll learn the rest of what you should know for the AP test. And now, as we are nearing the end, there's one last thing we will recommend. When concepts become a little muddy, it's good to study with a learning buddy. This is all we have to say. We hope you have a nice day. The poorly written, this poem's no lie, from Kathy and Amanda. Good luck and goodbye.
So Amanda was a friend of yours?
Amanda remains a friend of mine.
Oh,
so,
nice.
Yeah,
and it's on her it's on her blog?
I don't have no idea whose website
it's on
is.
some random person.
Yeah, like it had gotten
Pre-calculus xset.wordpress.com.
It's on a couple of websites.
Wow.
Although the only one that's annoying me is somebody posted it to Scribd, and they posted it where the last line is truncated, so you don't have the Kathy and Amanda
and now
anymore.
a musical rendition of your beautiful
I don't know if I want to encourage
poem.
this.
Oh, you're not playing my audio?
Wow, they've made it masculine.
Need to know if you don't, well, we told you so. Know your algebra very well, or your life will be a living hell. Absolute values may look silly, 'tis true, but unless you know them, you won't have a clue. Geometry will come back to haunt you. Know it, or else this class will daunt you.
I think that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I'll give it to you. There is an alternate version.
I'm trying to figure out what genre it is, and it kind of sounds like a 1930s musical.
Yeah.
No, I like the first one.
Oh, I don't like this one.
The first one was...
We'll save that one.
Yeah, okay.
Thumbs up. Thank you, Suno. And I will immediately copy this and put it in our Discord so you all can listen at your leisure. Mr. Jeff Jarvis, do you have a number, a pick, anything?
I'm going to do a book recommendation.
Yes.
I'm listening to this. I'm almost done with this book called The Material, which is a novel about a Masters of Fine Arts program for comedians, for stand-up comedians.
Oh, that's funny.
It is
that's
funny.
hysterical.
It's really well written. And what strikes me as I'm reading it is I'm replacing comedian with journalist, and it works throughout. They have bits, we have hot takes.
Yeah.
We have bits too.
We have bits too, right? They want laughter, we want applause and clicks and links and all that. And I could go on and on and on. And I probably will in a post. But it's very good. So I thought I would just recommend that tonight.
I have a friend who has a master's degree in narrative writing, who used her stand-up comedy routines to get her master's. So it's not made up. This is, you could.
I taught a brief course in comedy and journalism.
Oh, well, there you go.
Really? I couldn't tell. Sorry.
That wasn't a laugh. That was a spit take.
Very different. You'd learn that if you did the comedy MFA.
Do you want to do? You have many links. We could do some more.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
That's all.
Let's wrap it up.
I ordered
then.
the Chinese food. And
Get the Chinese food. I want to thank Kathy Gellis for making the trip up here.
Yay!
We really
Kathy.
appreciate her brilliance, her expertise, and her calculus poems. And thank you. Really nice to see you.
You didn't expect the math.
Twice in a few days. No, I didn't know you were a calculus nerd.
Never expect the math.
Never.
Did not expect
But
that.
once I know it, I'm not the least bit surprised you would get a 5.
Do you think that
you're brilliant?
Lawyers is that left brain? Whatever that is.
I mean, the thing notorious about lawyers is it's a profession you choose because you don't have to do math. So
well, I guess that's not true.
I would not expect that most lawyers are good at math.
I would say most musicians are good at math, but I don't know if most musicians are good at law.
I mean, the law is good for people who like
it's kind
systems.
Of right-brained, I think. Yeah.
Well, I mean, but law is also not one thing. It pull different practices pull different skills. Like writing is really important, but not all lawyers are good at that.
Right.
Procedures are good. Some people are good at the negotiating. Some people are good at the business. It takes all kinds.
According to Harrington, the right-brained lawyer is the lawyer of the future. So just remember that.
I have all the brain. So
you have left and right together.
I'm well-rounded.
Like a Chinese robot. She's got
I've got skin.
Skin in the game.
Skin
on my head.
and
On
two
my
sides
Did
of a
not
brain.
name last week's show Skin in the Game, is what I want to know.
Because Micah was like, I'm not touching that.
Well,
no, he was
okay. Jeff Jarvis, wait a minute. Let me read it. Someday this will be the last time I'll read it, but not today. He is
because he's emeritus forever.
Yeah, that's my sad story. He is the director emeritus of the Townite Center for Entrepreneurial Journalism at the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism at the City University of New York. Wouldn't you like to be have an endowed chair at the Huey Lewis Graduate School of Rock and Roll? Wouldn't that be a great thing to have, Kathy?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, of
That
course.
would be very cool.
That is Paris Martineau, theinformation.com. If you want to read her stuff, if you have a tip, her signal is Martineau.01. And she is open to all and sundry tips, so to speak. Not the tips from last week. More like...
Hey, come on, guys.
More like,
We've got to go a week without making this joke.
More like scoops.
Guys, Louisiana's going to pass an age verification bill for watching Twit.
Yeah,
Keep this up.
yeah, we don't want
True.
that. Thank you all for being here, and thanks especially to our Club Twit members. If you're not a member, we have a goal. Believe it or not, my goals are easy. They're simple. I would just like to get 1 in 10 people, 1%, 10%, 1 in 10 people who listen to the show to join the club. Right now, it's...
Be the 10%.
Be the 10%. The 10%, that's the few, the proud, the brave, the 10%. Right now, it's less than 2%. 1 in 20. I want to make it better than that. So please, if you're not a member of Club Twit, it's only $7 a month. You get ad-free versions of all the shows. You get extra content. Of course, access to our wonderful Discord, where a great community awaits you. If you're not a member, twit.tv/clubtwit. If you are, my deepest thanks, because you're making it possible for us to continue. You might have noticed there were no ads in this program. And that
for
means,
just 22 cents a day,
yes,
you can
could
support
save this
your
journalist.
favorite podcast.
Yes, save this journalist. It's not too late. Twit.tv/club. We like doing this. We'd like to keep doing it, and with your help, we can. We do the show every Wednesday about 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 2100 UTC. You can watch us do it live now on not just YouTube, youtube.com/twit/live, but today, and I think going forward, we'll be on Facebook, x.com, Twitch, Kick, Discord. What else? Am I missing anything? Anyway, everywhere.
Drive-in movies near you.
Drive-in movies. Just make sure you know, it's great if you want to watch live.
Screen at the gas station.
Yeah, yes. That was the weirdest experience of my life. Was I was filling up the tank and I saw Patrick Norton, my old co-host on Tech TV, on the screen I thought, what the hell is that? Anyway, so they do have podcasts on there, believe it or not. Please come back, and if you want to listen to the show at your own pace. Sometimes people listen at double speed, for instance, or in the middle of the night. You can download a copy from the website, twit.tv/twig. You can, of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel, twit.tv/thisweekingoogle. And the best thing to do is subscribe in your favorite podcast program, and you'll get it automatically the minute it's available. Thank you all for being here. We'll see you next time on This Week in Google.